Story 1. The Cold Boy, at mile marker 41. My hand was already on the deadbolt when the boy on the other side of the glass said the word that stopped me. It was a little after 3 in the morning, and the boy was standing where the light from the diesel canopy runs out and the desert starts, right at the edge of it, the way he'd been standing for 4 nights running. Bare feet on the cold concrete. A striped shirt too thin for a February night in the high desert, the kind of cold that gets into the Jaeger wash flats after midnight and sits on your chest like a wet sandbag. He had his arms wrapped around himself, and he was shivering. And I want to be honest and say that the shivering is what got me every time. 'Cause you can fake a lot of things, but I did not think then that a person could fake the way a cold kid shakes. That little stutter in the shoulders, the jaw going. I had the door half unlocked. I had the bolt turned and my thumb on the latch, and through the glass I said, "Buddy, where's your mom? Where's your folks?" And the boy looked up at me with his face all wet and he said, "Papa." And I stopped, because that's not a word you say to a stranger, that's a word you say to one person. And my son, my Cody, who was 7 years old and asleep that very minute in a double-wide 40 minutes south in a town called Jaegerwash proper, in a bed I did not pay for anymore, in a room I was not welcome in anymore. My son did not call me Dad, and he did not call me Daddy. He called me Papa since he could talk, because that's what my own father was to me, and I taught it to him sitting on the tailgate of a truck I don't have anymore. And it was the one thing in my whole ruined life that was still just mine and his. And here was this boy at the glass, this boy with the wrong striped shirt, saying it, saying my word. I'm going to tell you the rest of it, but I have to back it up first, because if I just tell you what happened at the glass, you'll think I was a fool. And maybe I was, but you have to understand what kind of fool and why, or none of the rest of it lands the way it landed on me. My name is Del Kearns, and for 14 months I ran the graveyard shift at the Sunliner Fuel and Diesel, which sat by itself on US Route 95 at mile marker 41, 22 miles of nothing in either direction, out where the Sonoran Desert stops pretending to be pretty and just gets on with the business of being empty. If you've driven that stretch, you know it. If you haven't, picture the last gas station before the map goes blank. 2 islands of pumps under a big steel canopy with Sunliner in red letters that buzzed. A squat cinder block building with the cooler cases along the back wall, and a coffee station and a rack of jerky and a register up front behind bulletproof glass that Mr. Adiemi had put in after the second robbery in 2019. Around back, the diesel lanes for the trucks, and a gravel lot where the long haulers would pull off and sleep with their engines running, so the whole night smelled like a running engine. That hot oil and exhaust smell that I stopped noticing after about a week and can still call up now anytime I want, which is more than I'd like. I took the job because it was the job that would have me. That's the truth of it. 18 months before that boy showed up at the glass, I had a house, a rented one, but a house and a wife named Renata and a son and a route delivering auto parts that had me home for supper most nights. I want to walk you through how a man loses all that, not because it excuses anything, but because the losing of it is the whole reason I couldn't say no to a cold kid in a parking lot. And the thing out there in the dark, it knew that about me before I knew it about myself. It knew it better than I did. Renata and I met young. She was a hostess at a steakhouse in Bullhead City, and I was 23, and I thought she was the smartest, funniest person I'd ever stood next to, and I still think that, which is its own kind of problem. We got married at the courthouse, and we were happy in the way you're happy before anything's really cost you anything. Cody came along when I was 27, and here's where I have to say the thing I don't like saying, which is that I drank. Not the falling down kind. Not the kind you see in the movies. The steady kind. The kind where there's always a cold one in your hand after 5, and then after 4, and then it's a warm can of Tecate in the truck at lunch, and you tell yourself it's just to take the edge off a bad route. The quiet kind that doesn't cost you a thing for years, and then costs you everything all at once. What it cost me was a Tuesday afternoon in the fall of 2024. I'd had 3 at lunch, and I picked Cody up from his after-school program because Renato was working a double, and I put him in the truck and I drove us home. And I did not hit anything and I did not hurt anybody, but I ran the stop sign at Mason 3rd doing about 40, and a Jägerwash sheriff's deputy was sitting right there, and my boy was in the back seat. And I blew a .11 into the machine at the county lot with my son's booster seat still buckled in behind me. That's the whole story of my life, right there, in one sentence, if you want it short. I ran a stop sign with my kid in the car because I couldn't get through a Tuesday sober. Renata didn't scream at me. I almost wish she had. She just got very quiet and very still, and about a month later there were papers, and I didn't fight them because there was nothing to fight with. I got supervised visits every other Saturday at first, at a Chuck E. Cheese type place in Kingman with a court-appointed lady named Deborah sitting 2 tables over pretending to read a magazine. I got my license back with a breathalyzer bolted to the dash of the beater I bought to replace the truck I lost. I went to the meetings. I got the little chips. I have a 14-month chip in my pocket right now, and I earned every day of it, and it did not give me my family back, because that's not how it works. No matter what anybody tells you in a church basement at 7 in the morning, what it gave me was the graveyard shift of the Sunliner, because that was the shift nobody wanted, and I was a man nobody wanted. And Mr. Adeyemi, who owned the place, and 3 others like it, and who did not care what your record was, as long as you showed up and didn't steal, mister. Adeyemi put me on nights, and I took it, and I told myself it was temporary. Nights meant I could sleep during the day and take my Saturday visits without missing work. Nights meant I didn't have to look at anybody. Nights meant 22 miles of desert between me and every place I used to belong. That's the man who was standing at the register at mile marker 41 when things started going wrong. A sober man, 14 months into it, who had traded a family for a stop sign and who worked alone in a box of light in the middle of the desert precisely because he could not stand to be around the living. I want you to hold on to that. The thing that came did not come for a happy man. They never do. It came for the softest, saddest, guiltiest part of me, and it came dressed as the one thing on this earth I would crawl over broken glass for. It came as a child, in the cold. I want to tell you about a Saturday, so you'll know what was at stake, so it isn't just a word when I say it later. This was maybe 2 months before the boy. A good Saturday, one of the every other ones, and by then I'd moved up from the supervised visits at the pizza place to the daytime kind, where I could take Cody somewhere on my own as long as I had him back by 6. I took him to the little park in Jägerwash with the one good slide and the splash pad that only ran in summer, and it was February, so the splash pad was dry and we had the whole place to ourselves. And I pushed him on the swings until my arms gave out, and then we sat on the tailgate of my beater, the beater with the breathalyzer in it, and I'd had to blow into it in the parking lot with my son watching. And he didn't ask. He never asks. He just watched me do it the way a kid watches a thing he's decided not to understand yet, and we ate gas station sandwiches and split a bag of the hot chips he likes and isn't allowed to have at home, and it was the best I'd felt in a year and a half. He talked the whole time. 7-year-olds do. He told me about a kid named Braden who could burp the alphabet, and about a show with a robot dog, and about how he was going to be a paleontologist and also drive a monster truck, both. And I sat there, and I ate my sandwich, and I let it wash over me, and I thought, if I could just have this exact thing, one Saturday in 2, on a tailgate, in the cold, I could do the rest of it. I could stay sober forever for this, and I meant it, and I still mean it. And near the end, when it was getting on toward 5 and the light was going long in gold across the flats, and I was starting to feel the 6 o'clock deadline the way you feel a tooth, Cody got quiet, which he never does, and he leaned into my side and he said, "Papa, when you take me home, will you do the thing?" And I knew what he meant, because we had a thing, we'd had it since he was 2, a little call and answer we did at bedtime, in the dark of his room, every night I ever tucked him in back when I lived there. It was too soft a thing to say in daylight, It was too soft a thing to say anywhere anybody could hear it, and I'd never once said it in front of another soul. Not Renata's mother, not the court lady, nobody. It lived in the dark of one room, and it belonged to two people, and that was the whole point of it. And here was my boy asking me to do it in the truck at 5 in the afternoon, because the truck that one Saturday and 2 was the closest thing we had left to the dark of a room that belonged to us. So I did. I leaned my head down against his head so nobody driving by could have heard, even if there had been anybody, and I said our part, and he said his part back, and I said the last bit, and he grinned up at me with the gap where his tooth had been, and that was the best minute of my whole year, my whole 2 years, maybe the best minute I've got. I'm not going to write down what we say. You'll hear it later, when it matters, when the not having said it anywhere is the only reason I'm still alive to tell you any of this. But I want you to know it existed before it saved me. I want you to know it was real, and warm, and ours, set head to head in a cold truck by a dry splash pad where nothing on this earth was watching. That's what was out there, in the dark, being studied, not just a lonely man. That minute. It wanted that minute, or something wearing that minute's clothes, and it spent a season of nights figuring out how to fake everything about it, except the one thing it couldn't reach. You learn the rhythm of a place like that fast. The night has a shape to it. 10 to midnight is the last of the real travelers' families pushing to make Vegas or Phoenix, a trucker or two, the occasional local coming back from something in Kingman. Midnight to 2 is the truckers, mostly the long haulers, pulling in to sleep the mandatory hours, and they don't come in much except for coffee and to use the head, and they're good company in small doses, the ones who talk. 2 to 4 is the dead time. That's the real graveyard. Nothing moves out there between 2 and 4 except the wind and whatever the wind is pushing around. And you sit behind the glass and you restock the cooler and you mop and you listen to the coffee machine gurgle and you watch the empty lot under the lights and you get to know the sound of your own building, the compressor kicking on in the cooler, the buzz of the Sunliner sign, the tick of the canopy lights, the little rush when a semi goes by out on 95 without stopping and the whole building seems to lean toward it and then settle back. 4 to 6 is the early birds, the shift workers heading to the mine over in Requena, the fishermen headed for the river, and then the sky goes gray and Maricela comes in to take the day and I drive 22 miles home to sleep. I liked the 2 to 4 the best, God help me. I liked being the only lit up thing for 20 miles. There was a peace in it that I hadn't earned and didn't question. A man like me, you take peace where it comes and you don't ask it for a receipt. You want to know what the dead time is actually like so you'll understand how a thing could work on a man out there without him ever quite catching it. It's this. The cooler compressor kicks on with a shutter and runs for 11 minutes and shuts off, and you learn the 11 minutes so well that when the quiet comes back it feels like a room going empty. The Sunliner sign buzzes at a pitch that gets into your back teeth. Out on 95, a semi passes maybe every 20 minutes, and you hear it coming from a long way off. A low building hum that grows and grows until the whole building leans into it, and the loose pane in the cooler door rattles, and then it's past, and the sound peels away south, and it's quiet again. Quieter than before, because now you're listening. The coffee machine gurgles to itself. The fluorescent tubes over the register have one that's going, and it ticks. A little dry tick every few seconds. Tick, tick. And you tell yourself you'll change it, and you never do, because in some animal part of you, the tick is company. And outside the light, all the way around, 360 degrees of it, is the desert. And the desert at 2 in the morning is not empty. That's the thing. People from the city never understand. It's the fullest, most crowded dark there is. It is absolutely stuffed with things that live by being unseen. And you sit in your box of light in the middle of all that watching, and most nights it's nothing, it's just the world, and you never once think that the watching might be pointed. You never think the dark has a favorite. Why would you? You're just a man mopping a floor. That's the thing I'd say to anybody who works nights out in the empty places. The peace is real. But the peace is also the bait. The quiet that lets you finally hear yourself think is the same quiet that lets something else hear you think too, and out there they are not always different sounds. The first wrong thing was the coyotes, except it wasn't. At first, it was just coyotes. You hear them all night out there. That's normal. The yipping and the long calls, the way a pack will set each other off, and then it rolls away across the flats and it's quiet again. I'd stopped hearing them the way I'd stopped smelling the diesel. But there was one night, this would have been late January, maybe 2 weeks before the boy, when the coyotes started up close, real close, right out past the diesel lanes, and then they stopped. All at once. Not tapering off the way they do. Cut off, like a hand had come down on them. And, in the quiet after, I heard one more sound, out past where the light stopped, and it was a coyote's voice, but it wasn't doing a coyote's thing. It was doing 3 notes, over and over, up and down and up. And the more I listened, the more it sounded like, and I know how this is going to land, it sounded like somebody trying to whistle a tune and not quite remembering it. 3 notes, up, down, up, like the front of a song. I stood at the glass with a mop in my hand, and I listened to that for maybe a minute, and then it stopped, and the regular coyote sound came back way off to the north like somebody had turned the world back on. And I told myself it was 2 different animals, and one of them had a hurt throat, and I finished my mopping. That's what you do. You've got an explanation ready before the fear can finish forming. Because the alternative is to stand in a cinder block box at 3 in the morning, 22 miles from another human being, and admit that something out in that dark was practicing a song. I want to be fair to myself. Any one of these things you explain away. That's not weakness. That's how a person stays sane enough to do a job. It's only later, when you line them all up, that you see the shape they were making the whole time. The second wrong thing was Ray. Raymond Sozy was a regular, one of my 2 to 4 regulars, a long hauler who ran produce and dry goods up and down 95 and Interstate 40 and pulled into the Sunliner 2 3 nights a week to sleep his hours. He was Diné Navajo, a big soft-spoken man, about 60, with reading glasses. He wore down on his nose, and a thermos he'd have me fill with hot water so he could make his own tea from bags he kept in his shirt. Pocket, because he said my coffee tasted like it had been strained through a transmission, which was fair. Ray was the closest thing I had to a friend out there. We'd talk, not about anything. About the Suns, about the price of diesel, about his grandkids over in Chinle whose pictures he kept clipped to the visor. He was an easy man to be quiet next to, which is a rarer thing than people know. The night I'm thinking of, Ray came in for his hot water around 2:30, and I told him about the coyotes, the whistling coyotes. I told it as a funny thing, the way you do. Hey, you'll never guess the weird thing I heard, and I watched Ray Sozy's face change while I told it. And by the time I finished, he wasn't smiling, and he'd set his thermos down on the counter, and he was looking at me the way a doctor looks at you when you've described a thing you thought was nothing. "Where'd you hear it?" he said. "Which way?" "Out past the diesel lanes, north and east a little, out toward the wash." I laughed, but it came out wrong. "Why, you think it's rabbit or something?" Ray didn't answer that. He picked his thermos back up and he looked out the front glass at the dark past the pumps for a while, and then he said, "Not really to me. You keep the doors locked back there? On the 2 side? After 10, yeah. Company rule, keep 'em locked." He looked at me over the reading glasses. "And Dell, you get anybody come up to the glass at night, out here, this hour, on foot? You don't open up for 'em. Not for anybody on foot out here at night. There's no reason for a person to be on foot at mile marker 41 at 3 in the morning, understand me? No good reason." I told him, sure. Of course, I wasn't in the habit of unlocking for strangers. And Ray nodded, but he didn't let it go easy. He stood there with his hot water, and he said one more thing, and I've thought about it every day since, the exact way he said it, slow, picking the words up one at a time like he was choosing rocks to cross a creek on. "My grandmother used to say there's things out in this country that got no shape of their own," he said. So they borrow. They'll wear a coyote, they'll wear a dog, and if they've been at it long enough, if they learned enough, and here he stopped. And he shook his head, and I could see him deciding not to say the rest of it, deciding I wasn't a man who needed the rest of it. They'll wear whatever gets the door open. That's all. That's the whole of what they want. The door open. You just keep it shut, and there's nothing out there can hurt you. It's a rule. You keep the door shut, you're fine. Then he took his hot water out to his truck, and he slept his hours, and he was gone before I could ask him what he meant. And I stood behind the glass, and I thought, that's the strangest thing anybody said to me in this job. And I filed it under old man superstition, the same drawer I file most things I don't want to think about. And I went back to my mopping. Keep the door shut, you're fine. I want that on the record too, that I was told. Plain as day, by a man who knew, 2 weeks before it mattered. I was told the rule, and I said sure, and I meant it, and it did not save me. Because the thing about that rule, I understand this now in a way I did not understand it then, is that the rule is easy right up until the moment it's the hardest thing in the world. Anybody can keep a door shut against a stranger. That's not the test. The test is what comes to the glass when it's finally learned enough to know exactly who you can't refuse. The boy showed up 4 nights before the night at the deadbolt. The first night I almost missed him. It was 3:10, and I was restocking the motor oil, and I looked up at the front glass, at my own reflection floating there against the black, the way you do 100 times a shift, and there was something at the edge of the light, out past the second island, right where the canopy glow gives out. Small, pale, not moving. I thought it was a dog at first. A lot of dogs get dumped out on 95 people, drive their unwanted animals out to the middle of nowhere and put them out of the car and drive off, which tells you everything you need to know about people. And the dogs make their way to the sunliner because it's the only light, and I kept a bag of kibble under the register for exactly that reason. So I thought, dog, and I got the kibble, and I went to the door, and I looked out through the glass, and it was not a dog. It was a boy, little, 6, 7 years old, hard to tell, standing at the edge of the light in a striped shirt with his arms wrapped around himself, looking at the building. Looking, it seemed like, at me. Now everything in me lit up at once, because a small child alone at the edge of the desert at 3 a.m. is the worst thing you can see. It's a nightmare. It means something has gone terribly wrong somewhere out in that dark. A wreck, a breakdown, a bad man, something. I had the door unlocked and open before Ray's voice even got a chance to speak up in the back of my head, and I was out under the canopy in the cold in my shirt sleeves calling, "Hey, hey, buddy, you okay? Where's your folks?" And the boy took a step back, into the dark, away from me. I stopped. You don't chase a scared kid. I knew that much even then. I crouched down right there on the concrete to make myself small, and I said, "Hey, it's okay, I'm not going to come at you. You want something to eat? You cold? I got a warm place right here. You can see it. It's just me. Where's your mom?" The boy stood at the edge of the light, half in it and half out, and I still couldn't see his face. Right, the canopy lights were behind him and above him, and they threw his face into shadow. So all I had was the shape of him, the striped shirt, the bare feet, the arms wrapped around his own middle, and he was shivering, that awful stutter, and in a small voice, a little kid's voice, thin and carried away half by the wind, he said, "I'm cold. I know, buddy, I know. Come on in where it's warm. Come on. I can't. Sure you can. Come on. It's just me. I can't come in. You have to come get me." And something about that "you have to come get me" snagged on something in me, some hook I didn't know was there, and I took a step toward him, and Ray Sozzi's voice finally cut through, clear, as if he was standing on my shoulder. "You don't open up for anybody on foot out here. You don't go to it." I stopped with 1 foot forward like a man playing a child's game, freeze. And I stood there in the cold with my heart going, and I looked at that shivering shape at the edge of the light, and I made myself say, "I can't leave the building, buddy. But you come on in, the door's open, you come in, and get warm, and we'll call somebody, okay? You come to me." The boy didn't come to me. We stood there like that, the two of us 30 feet apart on the cold concrete for a long time. Long enough that I started shaking too in my shirt sleeves. And then a truck came, an actual semi, real as anything, downshifting off 95 with its brakes hissing, swinging wide into the diesel lanes with its lights sweeping across the whole lot, and the lights went across the spot where the boy was standing, and he wasn't there. Not Runoff wasn't there. Just wasn't there. The light passed over an empty patch of concrete at the edge of the desert, and there was nobody in it, and there'd been nobody in it, the light said. And I stood there with a bag of kibble in my hand that I didn't remember picking up, and I could not have told you in that moment whether I'd seen a child at all. I went back inside. I locked the door. My hands were shaking, and I told myself it was the cold. I filled out nothing in the log, because what would I write? I sat behind the glass and I watched that patch of concrete until Maricella's headlights came up the frontage road at 5:40 and the sky was going gray. And I drove home 22 miles, telling myself I had imagined it, a trick of a tired mind and the canopy lights, a dumped dog, and a lonely man filling in the rest. But I didn't sleep that day. I lay in my rented room in Jägerwash with the blackout curtain up and the swamp cooler ticking, and I thought about a shivering kid in a striped shirt saying, "You have to come get me." And about my own son 40 minutes away in a bed I couldn't visit, and I could not get the two of them to stop bleeding into each other. The second night, I was ready for him, which is a thing I'm ashamed of now. Not ready to keep him out, ready to see him. I'd spent the whole day telling myself I'd imagined it, and the whole drive up telling myself I hadn't, and by the time I clocked in at 9, I had a plan, which was that if the boy came back, I would keep the door locked, but I would talk to him through the glass, and I would figure out where he came from, and I would call the sheriff, and I would do this right, because a man who does things right gets to feel like a man for a little while, and I hadn't gotten to feel like one in a long time. He came at 3:10 again, almost to the minute. I looked up from the register, and there he was, at the edge of the light, same striped shirt, same wrapped arms, same shiver. I got on the intercom. The Sunliner had an intercom for the pumps, a little speaker mounted on the canopy so you could tell somebody their card was declined without coming out, and I keyed it and I said, "Buddy, I see you. I'm right here. You come up to the door, I'll talk to you, but I can't unlock it, okay? Come up to the glass." And the boy tilted his head. That's the detail I keep coming back to. When my voice came out of the speaker on the canopy over his head, he tilted his head up toward the speaker, slow, like a dog hearing a sound it's trying to place, and he held it there a beat too long. And then he brought it back level, and I felt the hair go up on my arms, and I didn't know why. "I can't hear you in there," the boy said. "Not into anything. Just said it out at the building, and somehow I heard it plain over the wind, plainer than a little kid's voice 30 feet off should carry. It's cold. My feet hurt. Papa always comes and gets me. Papa." He said it that second night too, and I didn't catch it. God help me, I didn't catch it because I wasn't listening for it, because who would be? "Papa always comes and gets me." And I stood behind the glass with my thumb off the intercom, and I thought about Cody at that age getting scared in the night and standing at the top of the trailer stairs calling down, and how I'd go up and get him every time, every single time, back when I was a man who got to do that, and my eyes stung, and I hated myself, and I hated the desert, and I keyed the intercom, and I said, "What's your name, buddy? You tell me your name, I'll call your papa." The boy said, "You know my name." And then a coyote started up, out past the diesel lanes close, and it did the 3 notes. Up, down, up, and the boy at the edge of the light turned his head toward the sound, and I swear this on my son, the boy's mouth didn't move, but the 3 notes came again, closer, and I could not tell anymore whether they were coming from the coyote out in the dark or from the child standing in my lot. And I took my hand off the intercom, and I stepped back from the glass, and the boy watched me step back, and something in the set of his shoulders changed. Something got disappointed, and a car came off 95 with its lights swinging, and when the beam crossed the lot, he was gone again, and this time I didn't tell myself I'd imagined it. This time I sat down on the floor behind the register with my back against the cigarette rack, and I stayed there. And I prayed a little, which I don't do, and I waited for Maricella's headlights. There was one more thing that second morning, before Ray, and I almost left it out because it's the kind of thing that sounds like nothing until you've heard the rest. When the sun was full up and Maricela had the register, I went out to hose down the islands the way I did every morning, and there in the fine red dust that collects along the base of the second pump island, in the exact spot where the boy had stood, there were footprints, bare feet, small, a child's, or near enough, heel and toes, clear as a stamp, the little pads of the toes, pressed into the dust like a kid had been standing there a good while shifting his weight. And I followed them, because you would too, out from the island toward the edge of the light, toward the desert, and about 15 feet out, past where the concrete ends and the hardpan starts, the footprints changed. Not stopped, changed. The bare child's feet became over the space of 2 or 3 steps, like something turning itself inside out while it walked the 4-toed track of a big coyote, and those went on out into the creosote, unhurried, spaced long and easy, the way a thing moves when it's got nothing chasing it and nowhere it needs to be by a certain time. I stood at the edge of the pavement with the hose running in my hand, soaking my own boot, and I looked at the place where a barefoot boy had turned into a coyote mid-stride and walked off into the Sonoran morning, and I did not follow it any farther. I went back in, and I hosed the islands, and I washed the footprints away before Maricela could see them, which is a thing I did without deciding to do it, and which I've since understood was the thing beginning to work on me even in daylight, the covering up, the keeping quiet, the part of me already conspiring to keep it secret. That's how it gets in, a little at a time, long before the door. It gets you keeping its secrets first. I told Ray about it the next time he came through, which was the 3rd night. I've never seen a man go so still. I told him all of it, the boy, the striped shirt, the 2 nights, 3:10 on the dot, the head tilt, the 3 notes coming out of the dark and maybe out of the boy. And Ray Sozy set down his thermos and he took off his reading glasses and folded them and put them in his shirt pocket, slow, and he looked at me for a long moment and then he said, "Del, I want you to listen to me, now, and I want you to not decide I'm a crazy old man, because you've already half decided it, and I need you to undecide it for the next 5 minutes. Can you do that?" I said I could. "That's not a boy," he said. "You know that's not a boy. A boy don't stand at the edge of the light for 2 nights and never come to the food. A boy don't disappear when the headlights hit him. You've been telling yourself stories about it because the truth is worse than any story. And I understand that. I do. But the stories are going to get you killed. So I'm going to tell you the truth, and you're going to hear it." He leaned in. "There's a thing out here. My people have a word for it, and I'm not going to say the word, because saying the word is a way of calling it, and it's close enough already. It's old, and it's got no face of its own, and it lives off getting invited. It can't come in. That's the one thing about it, the one mercy. It cannot come through a door you don't open. It has to be let in. So it learns you, it watches you, it listens to you, it finds out what you can't say no to, and then it puts that on like a coat, and it comes to your door wearing it, and it asks you, real nice, to open up. And most people, it can't crack, because most people, what they can't say no to is something small. But you," and he stopped, and his voice got gentle, and that was worse than if he'd yelled, "You got a boy, don't you, somewhere that you don't get to see?" I didn't answer him. I couldn't. "I've watched you 14 months, Ray said. "I seen the little photo you keep flipped face down by the register so you don't have to look at it all night, but you can't put it away either. I got no idea what happened, and it's none of my business. But that thing out there, it's had 14 months to watch you too, and it has figured out the exact shape of the hole in you, and it is building itself something to fill it. You understand what I'm telling you? It's not coming as a monster. It's never going to come as a monster. It's going to come as the one thing you have spent every night of the last 14 months wishing would walk up to that glass, and you are going to want to open the door more than you have ever wanted anything. That's not weakness. That's the trap. The trap is built out of the best thing in you. The trap is built out of the best thing in you. I have turned that sentence over more times than I can count. Because he was right, and I knew he was right the second he said it, the way you know a true thing in your gut before your head catches up. And I sat there behind the bulletproof glass at mile marker 41, and I felt the bottom drop out of the whole world. So what do? I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. You keep the door shut, Ray said. That's it. That's all. That's the whole defense, and it's enough, if you can do it. It can knock, it can cry, it can wear your own mother's face, and beg. It cannot open a locked door. You keep it shut till the sun comes up. The sun's the other thing it can't stand. You keep every door locked from 2 till the sky goes gray, and you do not go out to it, and you do not answer it, and above all, Dell, above every other thing, whatever it comes as, however much it looks like somebody, you remember that the real one, the one it's pretending to be, is somewhere else, safe, asleep in a bed. That's how you know. The real ones are never out here. Whoever comes to the glass in the dark, the fact that they're here at all is the proof that they're not real. He put his glasses back on, he picked up his thermos, and at the door he turned around and he said the last thing, and I've saved it for last because it turned out to be the most important thing anybody told me in my whole life. If it ever gets to you, Ray said, if you ever find your hand on that lock and you can't remember why you shouldn't open it, you make it say the thing only the real one knows. You got a word between you and your boy? A special word? A thing only the two of you say? He watched my face, and he saw the answer on it. Yeah, you got one. Everybody who loves somebody's got one. You make the thing say it. It's been watching you. It's smart. It's learned your face and your boy's face, and it'll know your boy's name. But it can only take what it's seen. It can't get inside the things you never said out loud where it could hear. So you make it say the private thing. And when it can't, and it won't be able to, Dell, it will not be able to, you'll know. Then you keep the door shut. Then Ray Sozy went out to his truck to sleep his hours, and that was the last time I ever saw him, because Ray had a stroke on Interstate 40 outside Seligman 8 days later, and they found his truck on the shoulder and Ray gone before the ambulance got there, and I didn't know that yet. Sitting there the third night, with his warning still warm in the air. I want to put his death here, out of order, so you understand that when the fourth night came, I was alone with it. Whatever Ray knew, whatever more he might have told me, it went with him on the shoulder of Interstate 40. I had the rule and I had the trick with the private word, and I had nothing else. And I want you to know I clung to those two things like a man clinging to a fence post in a flood, because they were all I had, and they were almost not enough. The fourth night, the thing didn't come at 3:10. I sat behind the glass from 9 until 2, and nothing happened, and I started to think, in the stupid, hopeful way a person does, that maybe it was over. Maybe Ray scared it off somehow. Maybe I'd get to just be a man mopping a floor in a box of light. 2 o'clock came. 2:30. The coyotes were quiet. Too quiet, I know that now, that held breath quiet, that one notch under quiet where the desert stops making any of its little sounds because everything alive in it has decided to be very still. But at the time, I just felt it as relief. Peace. My undeserved peace. At 3:10 I looked up and the lot was empty, and I let out a breath. At 3:40 the phone rang. The Sunliner had a landline, a actual corded phone on the wall behind the register, because cell service out there was a joke, and the company needed a way to reach the store, and the store needed a way to reach the company. It rang maybe twice a shift. Always Mr. Adiemi's automated system or a wrong number. It had never once rung at 3:40 in the morning. It rang now, loud in the quiet, and I about came out of my skin, and I picked it up and I said, "Sunliner, this is Dell, the way you do." And it was, "Renata?" Dell. My ex-wife's voice, and it was wrong. It was high and fast and scared, and Renata does not get scared. Renata is the steadiest person I have ever known. "Dell, oh my God, Dell, is he there? Is Cody with you?" Everything in me turned to water. "What?" "No, Ren. What's wrong? Why would Cody be?" He's gone, Del. He's not in his bed. The back door's open. I fell asleep and I woke up and the back door was open and he's just gone. And his shoes are still here. Del, his shoes are still by the door. He went out with no shoes. And she was crying now, my steady Renata, coming apart on the phone. And I thought maybe he tried to walk to you. He's been asking about you. He asks about you all the time. Oh God, Del, where is he? Where's my baby? And right then, while my ex-wife was sobbing my name in my ear, I looked up through the front glass, and there at the edge of the light, at the exact spot in the striped shirt, with the bare feet on the cold concrete, was my son, was Cody, not the shadow-faced boy of the other nights. Him, my boy. I could see his face now, clear under the canopy lights, and it was Cody's face, the little scar through his eyebrow from when he fell off the porch at 3, the cowlick in the front that Renata could never get to lie down, the gap where he'd lost a tooth the last Saturday I saw him and he'd shown me proud as anything. It was my son, 40 minutes from where his mother was screaming into a phone that he was gone, standing in my parking lot at mile marker 41, shivering, barefoot, looking at me through the glass, and in my ear Renata's voice sobbing, small. Del, please, if you have him, if he found his way to you, please, just tell me, please. And out at the glass, my son's mouth opened, and he said, and I heard it through the glass clear as if there was no glass at all, Papa, Papa, I walked so far. My feet hurt. Come get me. Here's the thing I have to make you understand, because everything hangs on it. In that 1 second, all of Ray Sosi's careful warnings went out of my head like they'd never been there. Every one of them. Because that was my son. Not a shape, not a shadow. My son, with the scar in his eyebrow and the gap in his teeth. 40 minutes from home, in a parking lot at the edge of the desert, cold and barefoot and calling me the name he'd called me since he could talk. And his mother was in my other ear screaming that he was gone. And both of those things were true at the same time. He was gone from there and he was here, and there was not one cell in my body that was thinking about old man stories. I dropped the phone. I heard it swing on its cord, and I heard Renata's voice going tiny down at the end of it, saying, Del, Del, and I was already coming around the counter. I got to the door. I had my keys out. I got the deadbolt turned. That's the moment. That's where I started this. My hand on the deadbolt. The bolt already thrown back and my thumb was on the latch, and through the glass, 8 inches from my face, my son looked up at me with his wet, cold face and said it again, soft, so relieved, so glad, Papa, and that's the word that stopped me. Not because it was wrong, because it was right, because it was so exactly right, the exact way Cody says it. That little rise on the second part of it, Papa, and something in the perfectness of it, the studied perfectness, put a splinter of ice into me even as my hand was pulling the door, and I heard Ray's voice come up from way down under the panic, quiet the way he'd said it, slow, picking up rocks to cross a creek. You make it say the thing only the real one knows. I took my thumb off the latch. I don't know where I found it. I've thought about that a lot, where a man finds the strength to not open a door for his own child. I don't think it was strength. I think it was the splinter of ice, and I think it was 14 months of learning in church basements at 7 in the morning that the thing you want the most is the exact thing that's killing you, that wanting is not the same as good, that Del Kearns wanting something with his whole heart is historically the worst possible evidence that he should have it. I had a lot of practice by then at not trusting my own wanting. Maybe that's the only reason I'm here. Maybe the drinking gave me the one tool that saved my life, which is a joke so bad I've never been able to laugh at it. I put my hand flat on the glass. My son put his small hand up on the other side, matching it, cold little fingers, and it took everything I had not to feel the love come up my arm like current. Cody, I said, baby, I need you to do our thing, okay? Before I open the door, I need you to do our thing. How much? That's our thing. That was ours. Every night I ever put that boy to bed, back when I was allowed to, I'd get him under the blanket and I'd say how much, and he'd say to the moon and back and one more time, and I'd say and one more time, and that was how we said good night every night in the dark of his room where it was just us, where I never once said it in front of another living soul, because it was too soft a thing for a man like me to say where anybody could hear. It lived in the dark of one room. Nothing had ever watched us say it. Nothing on this earth knew it but me and my boy. The thing at the glass looked up at me, and its face, Cody's face, did something faces don't do. It held still, too still. The shivering stopped, all at once, like a motor cutting off, and the wet cheeks and the scar and the gap tooth all stayed exactly where they were, but there was nobody behind them anymore. Nobody working them, and the head began to tilt, slow, over to one side, past where a neck goes, and out of my son's mouth, in my son's voice, it said, "Papa, come get me." My feet hurt. "How much, Cody?" I said. My voice was breaking. I kept my hand flat on the glass. "Tell me how much." The head tilted the other way. The mouth worked. And it tried, God, it tried. I watched it reach down into everything it had stolen off me across 14 months. Everything it had heard me say out loud into the dark of that lot. And it came up with the shape of the words, but not the words. And it said, in Cody's voice, slow and wrong, like a record dragging, "To the Papa comes and gets me. Papa always comes and gets me." That's all it had. Papa always comes and gets me. It had heard me say Papa 1,000 times. It had heard me ache. It had watched me flip a photograph face down. It knew my son's face down to the scar, because grief had painted that face on the inside of my own eyes every night, and the thing had learned to read what was written there. But it had never been in that bedroom. It had never been in the dark of the one room where the soft thing lived. It could not say how much. It did not know that to the moon and back and one more time was the whole architecture of my love, because I had never once said it where the desert could hear. "You're not my son," I said, and the thing at the glass stopped pretending. I'm not going to tell you everything I saw, because Ray was right about that too. Description takes the power out of a thing, and I want this one to keep its power so you'll believe me about the rest. But I'll tell you, the striped shirt went slack like there was less inside it than a boy, and I'll tell you, the face slid, that's the only word. It slid, the features going loose and traveling, the scar and the gap tooth swimming for a second across something that was trying to be a face and not managing it. And I'll tell you that the hand on the other side of the glass, the small cold hand matched against mine, pressed, and the fingers were too long. They kept coming. They went longer than fingers go, and the nails dragged down the glass with a sound I still hear. A long dry scrape, and I fell backward onto the floor of the sunliner, and I scrambled back against the counter, and I did not scream. I want that on the record. I did not scream. I just got as far from the glass as the room would let me, and I stayed there. It stood at the glass the rest of the night. Hours. It went back and forth through everything it had. It was Cody. It was Renata. It wore her too. At one point, my ex-wife's face at the glass at 4 a.m. saying, "Dell, open the door. Help me find him." And that was almost worse. It knocked. It cried. It scraped those long nails down the glass, slow, patient. And it said "Papa" in my son's voice, over and over, until the word stopped meaning anything, until it was just a sound the dark was making. And I sat on the floor with my back against the cigarette rack, and Renata's voice, long gone, from the swinging phone, and I kept my eyes on the front door, and I did not get up, and I did not open it, and I said the rule out loud to myself, like a prayer, over and over. Keep the door shut, keep the door shut. The real one is safe in a bed. Whoever comes to the glass is the proof they're not real. Keep the door shut. At 5:50, the sky started going gray over the Requena Hills to the east, and the thing at the glass turned its head toward the light, the same tilt that dog hearing something tilt, and it looked at the gray coming up over the mountains for a long moment, and then it looked back at me on the floor. And it did the last thing, the thing I've never told anybody, the thing that made me quit the job and leave Jägerwash altogether and drive to a town where I don't know the desert. It smiled at me with my son's mouth, and it lifted the too long hand, and it wiggled the fingers at me, bye-bye, the way you wave at a baby, the way I used to wave at Cody through the window when I pulled out of the driveway to go to work, back when I had a driveway to pull out of. And then the sun cleared the hills and it wasn't there anymore, and Maricella's headlights came bouncing up the frontage road at 5:58, and I was still on the floor when she came in, and I told her I'd had a fall, and she believed me because it was easier for both of us. And I clocked out, and I drove 22 miles home, and I called Renata from the parking lot of my building with my hands shaking so bad I dropped the phone twice. Cody was fine. I have to say that plain, because it's the one good thing in all of this. Cody was fine. He'd woken up in the night and gone out the back door, kids do. It's the most ordinary thing in the world. He'd done it to look at the stars, he told his mother. He'd wanted to see the stars, and he'd gone as far as the Ruiz's yard next door and gotten cold and scared and curled up on their porch swing. And Mr. Ruiz found him at 5 in the morning going out for his paper, safe, sleepy, 40 feet from his own back door the whole time. He was never at the sunliner. He was never within 40 minutes of the sunliner. He was on a neighbor's porch swing under the same stars I was under, and the thing in my glass had reached into the exact hour my real son happened to be out of his bed, had known, somehow, that this was the night that the wanting would be at its worst, and it had put on the perfect copy, and it had come to collect. It came so close. You understand, if Cody had been in his bed that night, safe, and Renata hadn't called, I might have kept my head. But the thing timed it to the one night my boy was actually missing, so that when it came to the glass, it wasn't just wearing my son, it was wearing my son on the one night my son was really gone. So that every instinct screaming at me to open that door was, for once, telling the truth about the world and lying about the thing. It stacked a real emergency under a false one. It is smarter than anything I have words for, and it is patient, and it studies, and I taught it. That's the part I have to get to. I taught it. I found out about the other boy 3 weeks later. I quit by then. I gave Mr. Adeyemi no notice, which cost me my last check, and I didn't care. I moved to a town 200 miles away where the country is different, and I got a day job at a lumberyard. Days, only days. I will never work another night as long as I live. But I still had the app on my phone, the local news for Jägerwash and the whole 95 corridor, because Cody was down there and I needed to know what the weather was doing on my Saturdays, and that's how I saw it. A push notification on a Tuesday at lunch. Standing in the sun in a lumberyard 200 miles from the desert, a boy had gone missing off U.S. Route 95, 7 years old. His family had broken down at Night Radiator up near mile marker 63, 22 miles north of the sunliner, the next stretch of nothing up the road. The father had walked to get a signal, the mother had stayed with the 2 kids in the car, and sometime in the dark the little boy had gotten out. The mother dozed. She said, "Just for a minute, just for a minute." And I know exactly what that minute felt like, because Renata had it too. And when she woke, the back door was open, and the boy was gone, and his shoes were still in the footwell. His shoes were still in the footwell. A trucker had seen him. That was the detail in the article, the detail that put me down on a stack of 2x4s in a lumber yard with my heart going wrong in my chest. A long hauler coming south had seen, in his headlights up near mile marker 63, a little barefoot boy walking along the shoulder toward a man. Walking to him, not away. Going willingly, the trucker said, reaching up. And the trucker slowed down because it looked wrong. A kid out there at that hour, and by the time he got stopped and backed up, there was nobody on the shoulder at all. Just the family's broke down car another quarter mile on, with a woman starting to scream. And the trucker told the sheriff the one thing, the thing they put in the article, because they didn't understand it, and I did. I understood it all the way to the bottom of my soul. The trucker said the boy had been calling the man something as he walked to him. happy, relieved, like a kid who'd been lost and found his father in the dark. The trucker said the boy was calling him Papa. They never found that boy. They searched the whole corridor. They brought in dogs and a helicopter. They dragged the wash, and they never found one shoe, one thread, one thing. 7 years old. Papa, reaching up. I drove down there once. I don't know why. On a Saturday, I didn't have Cody. I drove the 200 miles back to 95, and I went up past the Sunliner without slowing down. I couldn't have made myself pull in for anything on this earth. And I went on up to mile marker 63. And I parked on the shoulder where the family had broken down, and there was a little cross there already, a white one, and a stuffed rabbit gone gray from the sun, and a few candles the wind had knocked over. Somebody had written the boy's name on the crossbar marker. I'm not going to put it here. It's not mine to put anywhere. I stood on that shoulder in the wind with the trucks going by, and I looked out at the creosote flats where they never found him, all that crowded watching dark gone flat and ordinary in the daylight, and I said I was sorry, out loud, to a boy I never met, because I was the closest thing there was to a person who understood what took him, and somebody ought to be sorry to him who understood, and it was going to have to be me. And I sat on that stack of lumber, and I understood what I had done, what my whole aching 14 months had built, and it is the thing I carry now instead of the things I used to carry. It couldn't get in at me. I kept the door shut. I made it say the private word, and it couldn't, and it smiled, and it waved bye-bye, and the sun came up, and I lived. I won. That's what I told myself for 3 weeks. I beat it, and all I'd really done was send it up the road, because it spent 14 months learning to be a father by watching one starve to death for the chance to be one. Everything it knew about how a papa sounds when he's glad to see you, how a papa's voice goes soft, how a papa always comes and gets you, it learned all of that off me, off my grief, off the thing I flipped face down by the register and couldn't put away. I was the school it went to. My love for my son, the best thing left in me. The one clean thing I hadn't managed to ruin that was the raw material. It took the shape of my longing, and it wore it up the road to a broke-down car and a tired mother and a real little boy who did not have a Ray Sozy in his life to teach him the rule. And that boy looked up in the dark and saw a father reaching for him, a perfect father, warm and glad and safe, the exact father I had spent every night at mile marker 41 wishing I could be, and that boy did the most natural thing in the world. That boy answered. I keep my Saturdays now. I've got unsupervised visits as of this spring. Renata and I are even something like friends, on the phone, careful with each other, and I get Cody 1 Saturday and 2, and I do not drink, and I do not ever let him out of my sight. And when I put him to bed, on the nights I'm allowed to, in the dark of whatever room we're in, I say, how much? And he says, to the moon and back, and one more time, and I say, and one more time, and I hold on to it. But I lie awake after, every time, because there is a thing out on US Route 95 that knows how to be a father now, and it learned it from me, and it is patient, and it is out there in the dark at the edge of the light right now, wearing the best thing I ever had, waiting at the glass of somebody's life for a door that isn't locked, and on the nights it's real bad, I get up and I check the locks, all of them, twice. And I stand at my own front door in the dark, with my hand flat on the wood, and I make myself say it the way Ray said it, low and sure, so I don't forget which side of the glass I'm on. The real one is asleep in his bed. Whatever comes to the door is the proof that it isn't him. Keep it shut. Story 2, The Woman at the Far Fence. The spotlight found her at the far end of the field, standing on the wrong side of the fence, and my mother lifted one hand to shade her eyes from the glare the way she used to do hanging wash. And she called my name across 400 yards of dark panels, and I had my hand on the door handle before my brain caught up to the fact that my mother could not walk to the mailbox anymore, let alone stand at the north fence of the Cinder Draw solar generating station at 3 in the morning, 11 miles from her bed. Veronica, she called. Warm, clear, my whole name, the way nobody had said it in 2 years. Miha, Venica, It's me. It's really me tonight. And God help me, I opened the door. I'm going to tell you why I opened it. And to do that I have to tell you about my mother. Because if you don't understand what I'd lost, you'll think I was a fool. And I wasn't a fool. I was something worse, and more ordinary than a fool. I was a daughter who wanted her mother back, and there is not a locked door in this world that wanting won't put a hand on. Let me back all the way up. My name is Veronica Salcedo, and everybody calls me Ronnie. And for 2 years I ran the graveyard patrol at a solar field out past Cinder Draw, Arizona, on State Route 77, up where the Sonoran breaks up into the high desert and the saguaro give out, and it's all creosote and ocotillo and black volcanic rock, which is where the town gets its name. The cinder, the old dead cones out to the east that were volcanoes back before there was anybody to be afraid of them. The solar field sat in a wide bowl of that country, 40,000 panels in long rows on a fenced section of land, about a mile on a side, with a substation in the middle where all the wire came together, and a little control building and a perimeter road that ran the whole square of the fence line. And my job, from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, 4 nights on and 3 off, was to drive that perimeter road in a white Vanguard security truck and make sure nobody cut the fence. People cut the fence for the copper. That's the whole reason the job exists, so I'll tell you about it. Because it's the mundane true thing underneath. And the mundane true thing is what makes the other thing so hard to hold. The solar field is a lot of copper, the grounding wire, the cable runs, the guts of the substation, and copper's worth money. And out in the empty country there's men who'll drive out at 2 in the morning with bolt cutters and a truck and strip a length of it and be gone before anybody knows. And it's dangerous as hell because some of that's live, and every so often one of them cooks himself on a line he thought was dead, and we find him in the morning, and that's the ugliest part of the job. The copper men, the desperate ones. So the field pays Vanguard, and Vanguard pays me $21 an hour with benefits to drive the fence all night and be a set of eyes and a radio. That's it. That's the job. I want you to hold on to how ordinary it is. A woman in a truck, driving a fence, watching for thieves. There's nothing in that job description about the other thing. There's nothing in the training about what to do when the desert decides it knows your name. I took the job for the benefits and for the hours, and mostly for the hours because of my mother. Her name is Concepcion Concha. She's 79 now, and she raised the 2 of us, me and my sister Marisol, mostly by herself in a little house on Calle Verde in Cinder Draw proper, cleaning rooms at the motel out on 77 and taking in sewing. And she was the strongest, sharpest, funniest woman in that whole town. A woman who could make a joke in 2 languages in the same sentence, and who never once in my childhood let me see her be afraid of anything, and who is, as I sit here telling you this, still alive and has not known my name for going on 2 years. That's the thing I have to make you feel, because it's the whole engine of everything that happened at the fence. My mother is alive and my mother is gone, both at the same time. The doctors call it Alzheimer's. My tia called it that the old people got tired of this world and started packing early. Whatever you call it, it came for Concha Salcedo slow, the way it does. A lost word here, a pot left on the stove there, calling me by my sister's name once and laughing it off, and then not laughing it off, and then not knowing it was wrong, and then not knowing me at all. 2 years ago she looked at me across the kitchen table, my own mother, and she got polite. That's how I knew we'd crossed the last line. She got polite with me. She said, "Thank you, dear," in English to the daughter who was cutting up her food, the way you thank a nurse. And I went out to my car in the carport, and I put my head on the wheel, and I cried the way you cry for a death, except there wasn't a death. There wasn't going to be a funeral. There was just my mother upstairs getting ready for a bed she'd need help getting into, alive and gone, and me down here grieving a woman who was still going to need her pills at 9. They don't tell you about that kind of grief, the kind with no box to put it in. You don't get a casserole for it. You just get up every day and take care of a body that used to have your mother in it, and you love it because it's hers. And some nights the love has no place to land because the person you're loving isn't home to catch it, and you say the words anyway into a face that looks back at you polite and far away. And that's the part that matters for what comes later, so remember it. I said the words anyway, every day. I sat at her bedside and I held her hand and I said, Ama, soy yo, it's me, it's Veronica, tu hija, I love you, I'm right here. I said all of it, all the loving things, both halves of a conversation, because somebody had to and there was only me. Marisol was gone, it was only ever me. I should tell you about Marisol, because she comes into this too, and because you can't understand me without her. Marisol was my little sister, and she died at 26, 19 years ago, on State Route 77, on the same road I drive to work, 8 miles south of the solar field that didn't exist yet, in a car with a boy who'd been drinking. I was the older one. I was the one who was supposed to look out for her, and the last thing I ever said to her was said mad, over the phone, because she'd asked to borrow money again, and I was tired of it, and I said some things a person shouldn't say to somebody they're going to lose that same night. And then the phone rang at 4 in the morning, and it was the hospital in Cinderdraw, and by the time I got there she was already gone. And my mother who was whole then, my mother who was a fortress, my mother held me up at that funeral, held me up on her own 2 feet, and she said into my ear, Mija, it wasn't yours to carry. And I never believed her, not for 19 years, but I held on to that she'd said it. It wasn't yours to carry. In her voice, in my ear, I want to show you one evening at that bedside, so the rest of it will cut the way it cut me. It's a small thing, but it's the whole machine, and I didn't know it was a machine at the time. I thought it was just love with nowhere to go. This was an evening before I'd leave for the field. In the winter it all started, and I had Concha propped up on her pillows in the back room with the little lamp on, and I was doing the thing I did every night before Yoli came, which was talk to her. You have to understand what that was by then. It wasn't a conversation. It hadn't been a conversation in a long time. It was me, talking, into a face that watched me, the way you'd watch weather out a window, mild and far and not really needing it to mean anything. And I'd learned. The home health lady taught me this. It's a real thing they teach you, that you're supposed to keep talking anyway, keep the warmth in the room, keep saying the person's name and your own name and the loving things, because somewhere under there they feel the tone even when the words are gone. So I did both halves. That's what I mean when I say I perform both halves. I'd say, Ama, soy yo, it's Veronica, you're Ronnie, and I'd wait, and she wouldn't say it back. So I'd say it for her. I'd say, there she is, inside. Wayala, 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 Miala, Wayala, 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 Wayala. There's my Veronica. That's what you'd say, huh, Ama? If you could, there's my girl. I'd tell her about my night coming up, the drive, the field, the coyotes, and I'd answer for her. You be careful out there, mija. You keep your doors locked. That's what you'd tell me. I'd say, I love you, Ama. And into the silence where she used to say, te amo. Mija back automatic as breathing. I'd put it there myself, soft. Te amo, mija. I know you do. I filled in her whole side, every night. For 2 years I sat in that lamplight, and I spoke my mother's love to myself in the shape of my mother, because the shape was empty, and I could not stand to let it be empty, and the window was cracked because the room got stuffy with the heater, and the cinders were out there past the yard in the dark, and I never once thought that saying a thing out loud where the dark can hear it is a way of teaching it. That's the machine. I built it a mother out of my own mouth, night after night, and I set it by an open window, When it finally stood at the fence and said, "Te amo, mija," I know you, it was not doing an impression of Concha Salcedo. It was doing an impression of me doing an impression of Concha Salcedo. It gave me back my own grief with her face on it. But I'm ahead of myself, and I promised I'd go in order. So there it is, the whole shape of me, before I ever get to the fence. A woman of 50 with a dead sister she couldn't save and a living mother she couldn't keep, working nights so she could be home days, pouring love into a face that couldn't give it back, carrying two kinds of grief that the world doesn't have names or casseroles for. That's who was driving the perimeter road at the Cinder Draw solar generating station the winter the coyotes started acting wrong. You see it now, don't you? You see what I had to offer. You see the exact shape of the hole. And the thing out there in the Cinder Country, it saw it too. It saw it a long time before I did. My cousin Yolanda stayed with my mother nights so I could work. That was the arrangement, and it mattered, so I'll set it down. Yoli would come at 9:30 and sit with Concha, do the last pills, get her down, sleep on the daybed in the front room, and I'd relieve her when I got home at 6:30 and she'd go to her own job at the school. It worked. It was the kind of thing a family does. Quiet, without anybody deciding to be a hero about it. Two women trading a sick old woman back and forth across the hours so that she never once woke up alone. I want that on the record too, because it's the good part, and there's little enough good in what I'm telling you. My mother was never alone. Somebody who loved her always had her. Right up until the night that stopped being enough, and even then, it was never that she was alone. It was the opposite of alone. That was the whole horror of it. The solar field at night is a strange place to spend your life, and I got to know it the way you know anything you drive through 10,000 times. In the daytime it's ugly and it's nothing. 40,000 dark blue panels tilted to the south, humming faintly, ordinary as a parking lot. People call it the mirrors. The folks in town, the cinder draw mirrors, but they're not mirrors. They don't shine. They're the opposite of mirrors. They're made to swallow light and give nothing back. And at night, that's exactly what they are, 40,000 black rectangles that eat your headlights. So that driving the perimeter road, you've got the fence and the desert on one side, all creosote and rock lit up gray-white in your beams. And on the other side, this vast field of nothing, this dark that your lights go into and don't come out of, acres and acres of engineered black. You learn not to look at it. There's nothing to see. That's what I told myself for 2 years. There's nothing in the field. Nobody goes in the field. The field is just the thing I'm guarding. You keep your eyes on the fence, where the trouble comes from, and you let the field be the dark at your back. Let me give you the shape of a night, so you'll understand how a thing can work on a person out there for months without ever quite tipping its hand. You clock in at 10 and you sign out the truck and you do a full lap, slow, checking the gates, and then you settle into the rhythm, which is a lap every 40 minutes with the in-between time parked at the substation writing the log and drinking coffee and listening to the radio and fighting the thing that is really trying to kill you out there, which is not a monster, it's sleep. The tiredness is the enemy the job actually trains you for. 10 to midnight there's a little traffic out on 77, the last of the mine shift going home to Cinder Draw, headlights sliding by out past the desert, and you take a strange comfort in them. Other people, awake, going somewhere. Midnight to 2 the road goes dead. 2 to 4 is the pit of it, the real graveyard, when the road is empty and the town's asleep and there is not one lit window in the whole visible world except the ones you carry with you, your own headlights, your own dome light, the little glow of the substation lights in the middle of the field, and you are the only waking human mind for a lot of miles in any direction, and the desert knows it. 4 to 6, the sky starts thinking about gray and the birds start up and you begin to believe in morning again. 6, Gil's truck comes up the access road and you go home. And the whole time, on your right hand, lap after lap, is the field. 40,000 panels. That much engineered, dark, does something to you over a couple years. Your headlights sweep along the fence and light up the desert on the left, every creosote bush and rock throwing its long moving shadow, alive with the sweep of the beams, and on the right the light just stops, goes in, and doesn't come back. You learn to keep your eyes left on the fence, on the desert, where the copper men come from, and to let the field be a wall of nothing at your shoulder. I used to tell myself that was discipline, good habit, eyes on the threat. I understand now it was the field teaching me not to look at it. 2 years of training myself, a little every night, to keep my eyes off the one direction the thing would eventually come from. By the time it stood up at the fence, I had spent 2 years learning not to see it. The coyotes came to the fence all the time. That's normal, out there. They'd trot the fence line in my headlights, or sit out past the wire and watch the truck go by with their eyes throwing back green. And I like them, mostly the way you like anything that keeps you company on a long night. There's a lot of them in the cinder country. They den up in the old lava tubes out to the east, and they work the whole bowl at night, and you hear them going, that yipping and singing, and it's the sound of the place. It's as much the place as the wind is. So when it started, it didn't announce itself. Nothing ever does. It came in wearing the most ordinary clothes the desert had. The first thing was a coyote at the north fence, and there was nothing wrong with it except that it was always there. The perimeter is a square, and I ran it counterclockwise. So the north fence was the far leg, the back of the field, the farthest point from the control building, and the road out a good 11 minutes drive from the gate, even pushing it, with the whole dark field on my right hand and the open desert climbing away to the cinder cones on my left. The loneliest stretch of a lonely job. And starting sometime in December, there was a coyote at the northeast corner of it, big one, sitting just outside the wire in the same spot every single pass, watching the truck come and watching it go. I'd do a lap every 40 minutes or so, and there it would be, every lap, all night, not hunting, not moving, just sitting at the corner of the fence with its eyes throwing back my headlights, green then gone. Now a coyote will hold a territory, and a smart one learns that a truck means nothing to fear. So on its own, that's a story you can tell yourself, and I told it. There's a coyote that likes the northeast corner fine, except it was there every night I worked, 4 nights on, and it was there in the same spot when I came back from my 3 nights off, like it had been sitting there the whole time waiting for me to come back. Which, of course, it hadn't. Coyotes don't do that, and I knew coyotes don't do that, and I kept the thought in the drawer where you keep the things that don't fit. The second thing was that it started standing up. I don't mean it stood up and trotted off. I mean one night in January I came around to the north fence, and the coyote at the corner was standing on its hind legs, upright, like a man, its front paws down at its sides and its weight back on its haunches, and it was standing there at its full height, which was too much height, taller than a coyote has any business being, tall as a person, at the corner of the fence, facing the road, waiting for the truck, and when my lights hit it, it didn't drop down and run. It held the pose for a 3 count, upright, watching me, and then it went down onto all 4s, not fell, went down, folded down, deliberate, the way you'd crouch, and it trotted off along the outside of the fence into the dark, easy, unhurried, and I sat there in the truck with my foot off the gas and my heart going, and I told myself I'd seen it wrong. A coyote reared up on its legs after something, a bird, a bug, and the angle and the headlights made it look tall. That's all. That's a thing that could happen. The third thing I couldn't tell myself anything about, and it's the one that made me start remembering my mother's stories. It kept pace with the truck. This was a week after the standing. North fence, 3 a.m, and the coyote came off the corner and ran the fence line alongside me on the outside of the wire in the spray of my headlights, matching the truck. And I was doing 35, maybe 40 on that stretch because it's straight and graded and you open it up a little to break the boredom. And this coyote ran alongside the truck at 35 miles an hour, easy, not stretched out, and killing itself the way a real animal runs flat out. just loping, loose, keeping me company. Its head turned sideways to look at me through the window while it ran, for most of the length of the north fence, a quarter mile looking at me at 40 miles an hour. And nothing in this world runs 40 miles an hour for a quarter mile with its head turned to look at you. Nothing. And I put my foot down and pulled away from it, and I did not look in the mirror. And I finished my shift with the doors locked and the radio in my hand. And driving home in the gray morning down 77, I heard my mother's voice in my head for the first time in a long time. Not the polite, faraway voice she has now, but her real voice. From when I was small, telling me a thing she told me and Marisol 100 times. The thing every mother in Cinderdraw told her kids to keep them from wandering out into the cinders at night. There are things out there with no face of their own, she used to say. En los cinders, old things. They can't make a shape, so they take one. They'll wear a coyote. They'll wear a dog, a cow, a bird. And if it's been out there long enough, if it's got old enough and hungry enough, it learns to wear us. It'll wear a person. And here's the part she'd lean in for, the part that scared us good and sent us running to bed. It can't come to you as itself because it hasn't got a self, so it has to call you out to it. It calls you in a voice, sometimes a voice you don't know. And sometimes this was the bad part. This was the part Marisol used to make me check under the bed for sometimes. If it's learned you, it calls you in a voice you love. Your mama's voice, your sister's voice, calling you out into the dark. And you must never, never answer it, because the second you answer, the second you go to it, you've told it yes. You've said, I'm the one, come and get me. The people you love are home in their beds, she'd say. Whatever calls you from out in the cinders, no matter whose voice it wears, the fact that it's out there is how you know it's lying. Because your people are home. Your people are safe. Anything that calls you out into the dark is not your people. I'd forgotten I even knew that. 50 years old, and I'd filed it under the same drawer as La Llorona and the Chupacabra, the stuff you tell kids, the stuff that isn't real. And now I was driving home from a job where a coyote had just run alongside my truck at 40 miles an hour looking me in the eye, and my mother's voice came up out of 1970-something to tell me the rule. And my mother herself was 11 miles away in a bed, polite and far and gone, no longer able to tell me anything, no longer able to remember she'd ever warned me at all. That's the cruelty of the whole thing, right there, and I didn't even see it yet. The one person who'd armed me against it was the one person it was getting ready to become. I want to put one more night in here before the voices started, because it's the night I stopped being able to pretend the wrongness was only mine, only in my head, only a tired woman seeing things. It's the night other people saw it too, and ran. Late January. The Coppermen finally came. I had been warned they would. Vanguard had a bulletin out. There'd been strips hit all up and down the 77 corridor, substations, a cell tower, a stretch of the field over by Tinaja Springs. And one night, around 2, I came around toward the north leg and my headlights caught what I'd been driving that fence for 2 years to catch. A truck backed up to the wire, an old flatbed with the lights off, and 2 men at the fence with bolt cutters and a coil of grounding wire already pulled and glinting on the ground between them. I did what you're trained to do, which is nothing brave. You don't confront them. You light them up, you call it in, you get their plate, you let them run. So I hit the high beams and the spotlight, and I got on the radio loud. Vanguard base. I've got 2 subjects and a vehicle at the north fence, cutting active, requesting sheriff. And I laid on the horn. And the whole idea is that thieves run from light and noise because they're cowards and they don't want the law. And these 2 should have thrown their cutters in the truck and peeled out down the access track the way they always do. They didn't run from me. They ran into the field. That's the thing I can't get past about that night. 2 grown men, copper thieves, hard cases, the kind that carry and the kind that have done time. They took one look back over their shoulders, not at my truck, not at my lights, but past my lights, out into the dark of the field behind them. And whatever they saw out there in that engineered black put a kind of fear on them that my truck and my horn and the word sheriff never could have. And they dropped the cutters, and they dropped the wire, and they left the truck, their own truck, keys in it, running, and they went over the wire and out across the open desert on foot into the cinder country in the middle of the night, which is a thing no copper thief with a working brain does, because the desert at night will kill you deader than any charge the county could file. One of them didn't make it far before he went down. I found him. I shouldn't have gotten out. I know that now. But I thought he was hurt. And I was still a person who got out of the truck for a man on the ground. I found him 50 yards out past the fence, on his knees in the creosote, and he was not hurt, he was praying. This hard-looking man in a Carhartt jacket with a jailhouse tattoo on his neck was on his knees in the desert praying in Spanish, fast, the Ave Maria, over and over. And when my flashlight hit him, he grabbed my arm, and he said, "La viste? Did you see her? La mujer, the woman. She was standing in the middle of the, there's no way in. There's no road in. How is there a woman standing in the middle of it?" And he was pointing back into the field, into the panels, into the part of it there is genuinely no way to drive or walk to without going down the maintenance rows. And there was nothing there. My flashlight showed nothing there. Just the rows of dark panels going back and back. "What woman?" I said. My voice didn't sound right. "What did she look like?" And he looked at me, this praying stranger, and something moved across his face, and he said, "She looked like she was waiting for somebody. She had her hand up." And he did it. He lifted his own hand up to shade his eyes, the hanging wash gesture, my mother's gesture. Though I didn't know yet that it was going to be my mother's gesture, I only felt the ice of it without the meaning, like this, like she was looking for somebody in the light. And she was smiling. He crossed himself. No estaba bien. It wasn't right. The smile wasn't a person, doesn't, and he couldn't finish it. And he got up, and he went on foot out into the desert after his partner, away from the road, away from the running truck with the keys in it, choosing 11 miles of killing desert over one more minute near that field, and I let him go, because part of me understood him completely. The sheriff's deputies came and took the truck and the cutters and wrote it up as a theft in progress. Interrupted, subjects fled, and they found the two men 2 days later walking on a dirt road 9 miles out, dehydrated and half out of their heads and lucky to be alive, and both of them refused to say one word about why they'd run into the desert. Instead of down the road, refused so hard the deputies figured they were covering for a third man, a boss, somebody in the field they were protecting. There was no third man. I knew there was no third man. There was a woman standing in the middle of a field there's no way into, with her hand up, waiting, smiling a smile a person doesn't smile, and she'd been there before she was ever my mother, wearing whatever the two of them each had to lose, and they'd been smart in the one way that mattered, smarter than me. They'd run the second they saw her. It took me until March to learn what they knew in one look. You don't wait to see whose face it's going to put on. You run while it's still a stranger. Once it's someone you love, it's already too late to run. It moved to voices in February. The first voice wasn't my mother. I've thought about why, and I think it's because it works its way up, the way you'd practice a hard song by starting with the easy parts. The first voice was Marisol. I was parked at the substation doing my 2:30 check, engine off, window down because the cab gets stuffy, filling out the log on the clipboard, and out of the dark field behind me, the field, not the desert, the panel side, the side I'd spent 2 years teaching myself. There was nothing, and a voice said, "Ronnie," just my name, once, and I knew it. 19 years, and I knew it in half a syllable, the way you'd know your own child's cough in a crowded room. It was my sister. It was Marisol's voice, Marisol who I'd last heard mad on a phone the night she died. Marisol saying Ronnie, out of the dark of a solar field, the way she used to say it, coming in the back door. That little up note on it, "Ronnie, you home?" I dropped the clipboard. I sat there with both hands on the wheel, and I did not turn around. And every part of me wanted to turn around, wanted it so bad it was like a hand pushing on the back of my head, because it was my sister, my baby sister. And I'd had 19 years of wishing I could hear her say my name one more time and take back the last thing I said to her. And here it was, right behind me, in the dark, saying Ronnie, the way she used to. And I heard my mother's voice, the old strong one, over the top of it. Your people are home. Marisol is not out there. Marisol is 19 years in the ground at Sacred Heart, and whatever is saying her name is a liar, and if you turn around, if you answer, you're telling it yes. I started the truck. My hands were shaking so bad it took me 2 tries to get it in gear. And behind me, as I pulled away from the substation, the voice changed its tune, just slightly. Just enough it said, Ronnie, don't leave me again. And that one nearly took the top of my head off. Don't leave me again. Because that's the exact shape of the thing I've hated myself for 19 years. That I left her. That I was mad. And I hung up and I left her to get in that car, and the thing in the field knew it. It reached into me and found the worst sentence in my whole life, and it said it in my dead sister's voice. And I want you to understand that it did not learn that sentence from Marisol, because Marisol never said it. Marisol died before she could say anything to me ever again. It learned that sentence from me, from 2 years of me at my mother's bedside and 19 years of me lying awake. It learned it off my own guilt. It was reading it off me like words off a page. I drove the rest of that shift with the windows up and the radio playing loud, human voices, the all-night station out of Tucson, anything. And when the sun came up, I was never so glad to see a thing in my life. I almost quit. I want you to know I almost quit. That I'm not the kind of fool who just keeps walking into it. I drove home that morning, and I sat in the carport, and I thought, I'll tell Yoli I can't do nights anymore. I'll find something in town, days, register work, anything. And then I went inside, and my mother was awake early and agitated the way she got calling out. And Yoli was worn to the bone. And I did the math. I did every single day, which is that the night job with the benefits was the reason my mother had her pills and her home health visits and a roof, and that there was no registered job in Cinder Draw that came with what Concha needed, and that if I quit to save myself from a voice in a field, my mother would pay for it in the only currency she had left, which was comfort and care in the little time she had left to be cared for. And I looked at her face, my mother's face, far away and frightened of something in the room that wasn't there, and I put my own fear back in the drawer with all the other things that didn't fit, and I went to work the next night. Because that's what you do. That's what love makes you do. It makes you drive back out to the thing. I understand now that this, too, was part of how it worked. It didn't just find the hole in me, it found the reason I couldn't run. It knew my mother was the hook, and it knew my mother was also the chain, the thing that kept me coming back out to the fence night after night, no matter what called me from the dark. It had all the time in the world. It just had to keep practicing until it got the last voice right. The man I relieved every morning was named Gilbert Neish Gill. Everybody said Gill, and he'd done 22 years as a jailer over at the county before he retired into this, and there was not one superstitious bone in that man's body. Which is exactly why what he told me landed as hard as it did. Gil worked the day guard shift, 6 to 2, and there was a swing man for the 2 to 10, so mostly Gil and I only overlapped for 10 minutes at the gate at 6 in the morning, him coming on, me going home, and we'd talk while I signed out the truck. I'd never told him about any of it. You don't. You've got a monster in your fence line, you do not lead with that to a retired jailer, you'll be talking to the company doctor by lunch. But the morning after the Marisol night I must have looked like something the coyotes dragged in, because Gil took one look at me signing the clipboard with a shaking hand, and he got quiet, and then he said, "Not really a question, north fence." I looked up at him. "You've been running counterclockwise," he said, "so you're spending your 2 to 4s out on the north leg, and you've got a look I've seen before." He leaned on the gate, and he pushed his hat back and he looked out at the field going gold in the first light, and he said, "You hearing things out there, Ronnie, out past the wire? Somebody you know?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, and Gil nodded like I had. There was a kid before you, he said. Before your time, before Vanguard even had the contract, when it was still Copperline doing the security. Young guy, Denny Foss. Lost his wife the year before, car thing, young, real bad, left him with a baby, and he took the night patrol here because it was quiet and it paid and he could be home days with the kid. Sound familiar? Gil looked at me sidelong. It picks a type. I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to pretend I do. I left that kind of talk back in the world I grew up in, and I'm not going back to it, but I've watched this field 12 years, and I'll tell you the one thing I know for sure, which is that it picks the ones who are already carrying a body around, the grievers, the ones with somebody they'd give an arm to hear one more time. It leaves the happy ones alone. You ever notice the happy ones don't last on nights out here? They get bored and they quit. It's the sad ones it keeps. It's the sad ones it wants. What happened to Denny? I said. Gil was quiet a while. One night in his 6th month, he drove the patrol truck straight through the north fence, he said. Full speed. Tore out 40 feet of it and kept going, out into the desert, till he bogged the truck in a wash about a half-mile out. And then he got out and kept going on foot. They found him at dawn 3 miles out toward the cinder cones. No shoes, walking, still walking, out away from the road, out toward the lava tubes. Wouldn't say why. Wouldn't say anything. For 2 days. And when he finally did talk, all he'd say was that he heard her, his wife, out past the fence, calling him, saying, "Come home." And he said, this is the part stuck with me. 12 years. Ronnie, I was the one drove out and helped carry him back. He said she sounded so happy. She hadn't sounded happy since before she got sick. I just wanted to get to where she was, that happy. Gil straightened up off the gate. He didn't come back to work. Moved away, took the baby. Last I heard he was up in Flagstaff and doing alright. He's the lucky one. He's the one that got out with just a scare. He handed me the truck keys for the next night. You keep the truck on the road, Ronnie. Whatever you hear out there, you keep 4 wheels on that perimeter road, and you keep moving, and you do not walk out into that field. It can talk. Far as I've ever seen, it can only talk. It can't make you go to it. It can only ask. Long as you keep the truck on the road and don't answer, it's just a bad voice on a long night. You understand me? I said I understood him. And I want you to notice that Gil, a man who didn't believe in a single thing he couldn't book into evidence, had landed in the exact same place my mother landed all those years ago, telling ghost stories to scared little girls. It can only ask, don't answer. Keep the door shut, keep the truck on the road, don't walk out to it. 2 people who had nothing in common, who'd never met, who believed in completely different worlds, and they gave me the identical rule, because the rule is older than any of the ways people explain it, and the rule is the only thing that works. That was the morning I stopped almost quitting and started being afraid in an organized way, which is a better way to be afraid if you've got to be afraid. I kept the truck on the road. I kept moving. I got a big thermos and I filled it with coffee and I played the Tucson station loud and I ran my laps with the windows up, and for a few weeks it was, like Gil said, just a bad voice on a long night. It called in Marisol's voice and I didn't answer. It called twice in a voice I didn't recognize at all, a man's voice, low, saying my name from the field, trying something, some key that didn't fit my lock, and finding it didn't fit and putting it down. And then about a week before the Thursday, it tried my mother for the first time, and it got her almost right, and the almost is its own kind of terrible, so I have to tell you about it. It was the small hours, and I was on the east fence, not even the north, when Concha's voice came out of the field, and it was wrong. That's the thing. It was my mother's voice, but it was my mother's voice now, the flat one, the far-away, polite one, the disease's voice, saying, "Hello? Hello, dear? Where am I? Where's the girl who does my food?" That exact lost, mild, unmoored way she talked now, the not knowing, the politeness. And it should have been less frightening than Marisol had been, and instead it was worse. So much worse, because it meant the thing had gotten close enough to my actual mother, my actual sick mother, to have that voice too. The ruined one, the real current one, and because, God help me, for 1 sick second I felt myself wish it would do the other voice instead. The old voice, the whole one. I stood there at the east fence hating myself, actually wishing the monster would give me the better forgery, and I understand now that the wish was the thing it was listening for. It heard me want the whole one. It heard exactly which version of my mother I was starving for. And it went away that night, early, satisfied, to go practice the one I'd asked for, and it did not come back for a week, and when it came back it had her exactly, wholly, perfectly right, and it came to the north fence and the blue housecoat, and that brings me to the Thursday. It got the last voice right on a Thursday in the middle of March. I know it was Thursday because Thursday was the last of my 4, the one where I'm running on fumes. 3 nights of no real sleep stacked up behind me, and the bone-deep stupid tiredness that a night shift person will know exactly what I mean, and nobody else ever will. That tiredness is a thing the dark uses. It wears down the part of you that keeps the drawer shut. By the 4th night, everything I'd been filing away all week was loose in me, rattling, and I think the thing knew that too. I think it waited for the Thursday on purpose. I think it had learned my whole schedule the way it had learned everything else about me, 4 on and 3 off, and it picked the exact hour I had the least of myself left to say no with. I was on the north fence at 10 to 3 when the field lights failed. There's a bank of security lights on the substation, and they'd been getting flaky for a month. The copper men had damaged something, and that night, as I came around toward the north leg, they went out, all at once, the whole middle of the field going from dim to full black, so that there was nothing in the whole bowl but my headlights and the stars, which out there are weight, that many stars. They pressed down on you, and I slowed down, because a woman driving a fence at night with the yard lights out is a woman being careful, and I reached over and flipped on the truck's spotlight, the handheld one on the pillar, and I swung it out ahead of me down the north fence to see what the dark was hiding, and the spotlight found her at the far end, standing on the wrong side of the fence. My mother, Concha Salcedo, 79 years old and 11 miles from the bed I'd watched Yolanda put her into at 9:30, standing outside the wire at the far northeast corner in her good blue housecoat, the one with the little flowers, the one she was wearing in the last photo of her that has her still in it, from before, and she lifted one hand to shade her eyes from my spotlight. That exact gesture, the hanging wash gesture, a gesture the disease had taken along with everything else, a gesture I had not seen my mother's body make in 2 years, and she called my name across 400 yards of dark. Veronica. Not Marisol. Me. My name. My whole name. The way she said it when I was a girl, and I'd done something that made her proud, that little music in it. Mija. Ven acá. It's me. It's really me tonight. I know you. I know you. Mija, come here to me. I know you. That's what she said. I know you. And that was the thing that reached in past 19 years and 2 years and 50 years all at once and grabbed the very center of me. Because do you understand? That is the thing. That is the only thing. That is what I had been starving for at that bedside for 2 years. Not that she'd get better. I knew she wasn't getting better. I'm not a child. Just that one more time. One more single time before the end. She would look at me and know me. Know my name. Know I was her daughter, and not a polite stranger cutting up her food. I had prayed for it. On my knees, which I don't do, like Ronnie doesn't do a lot of things. I had prayed to have my mother know me one more time, and here she was at the far fence, in her blue housecoat, with the flowers, in the dark, saying, I know you, Mija, come here. And I opened the door. That's where I started this. I had the door open and 1 foot down on the gravel, and my mother calling me home across the field, and the dome light of the truck was on me, and the cold was on me, and I was crying. I was already crying, and I took a step, and she said the next thing, and the next thing is what saved my life, though it didn't feel like saving. It felt like the floor of the world dropping out. Come home, Mija, my mother called. Come home to us. Marisol's here with me. We're both here. We're waiting for you. Come home. And it'll be like before. All of us. Come home. Marisol's here with me. And the drawer I'd been holding shut all winter came open all the way, and everything fell out at once. And I stood there with one foot on the gravel, and I understood three things in the space of one breath, and each one was worse than the last. The first thing was, my mother does not know my name. She has not known my name in 2 years. That is not a small fact. That is the central fact of my whole life right now. A mother who can say, Veronica, mija, I know you is not more of my mother. She is not my mother having a good night. She is impossible. She is more impossible than any monster. Because the disease does not have good nights like that. The disease does not give back the name and the gesture and the music all at once. It does not give any of it back, ever. That's what makes it the thing it is. The wholeness was the lie. The very thing I wanted my mother, whole, knowing me, was the one thing that could not, in this world, be true. It handed me my heart's whole wish, and the wish itself was the proof it was false. The second thing was, Marisol is dead. Marisol has been dead 19 years. My mother, when she was whole, knew that better than anyone, held me up at that funeral, told me it wasn't mine to carry. My real mother would never, could never, say Marisol's here with me. Come home to us. Because my real mother buried Marisol and grieved her and knew where she was, which was in the ground at Sacred Heart, not out in the cinders. Only a thing that had never loved Marisol, never buried her, only knew her as a face and a name and a wound it could dig at only that would say, come home, all of us, like before. It was offering me the impossible, both of them, the whole family sewn back together in the dark, and the size of the offer was the size of the lie. And the third thing, the one that put me back in the truck, the one I've never gotten all the way clean of, the third thing was that I knew, standing there, exactly where it had learned to say, I love you, mija. It wasn't yours to carry in my mother's voice. It hadn't learned it from my mother. My mother couldn't say it anymore. It had learned it from me. From 2 years of me at that bedside saying the loving things into a face that couldn't say them back, saying ama, te amo, saying it wasn't your fault, saying, I know you, even when she didn't know me. I had sat there night after night and performed both halves of a conversation my mother could no longer hold. And the thing in the cinders had been listening the whole time, and it had taken my half, my love, the words I poured into the dark because there was nowhere else to put them, and it had learned my mother's part off of me, and now it was standing at the fence in her blue house coat, playing my own love back to me in her voice. It was feeding me my own heart. Everything warm in that voice at the fence was something I had made, alone in a sick room, and it had eaten it, and here it was, giving it back with the hook in it. I got in the truck. I don't fully remember doing it. I remember the door, and I remember my own voice saying no, no, no out loud, and I remember getting it in gear. And I remember that as I pulled away from the north fence, the thing at the corner stopped calling in my mother's voice. All at once, cut off, the way the coyotes used to cut off. And it did the last thing, the thing I'll be seeing when I die. It came along the fence, after the truck, not walking. My mother's shape, in the blue house coat, came along the outside of the north fence, keeping pace with me, upright, gliding, its feet not doing what feet do, the house coat not moving the way cloth moves, faster than the truck, faster than a person can run, faster than the coyote ran, the pale shape of my mother flowing along the wire in my side mirror with its face turned toward me. And the face was wrong now. It had stopped bothering to be right. My mother's face coming apart at the edges like something underwater, and out of it, degrading, dropping down through registers, came my name, Veronica, then Ronnie, then Marisol, then a coyote's yip, then my mother's voice again. All of them, cycling, everything it had ever stolen from me thrown at the glass at once. Come home, don't leave me again. I know you. Come home, and I drove that perimeter road at 55 miles an hour with a thing wearing my mother's housecoat, pouring my whole grieving life at the window, and I did not stop, and I did not look at it, and I did not answer. I got to the control building, and I went inside, and I locked the steel door, and I put my back against it, and I sat on the floor, and I called my supervisor on the radio and told him I'd seen prowlers on the north fence, and I was sheltering in place, which is procedure, which was a lie and was also the truest thing I could make the radio hold. And I stayed on that floor with my back against that door until the sky over the cinder cones started going gray at 5:45, and I did not hear my mother's voice again. And when the day guard's truck came up the access road at 6, I walked out to it on legs. That didn't work right, and I told him I was sick, and I drove home. I drove home too fast. I ran the light at 77 in Mesquite, and I didn't care, because there was a thing I had to know, a thing that had its hand around my heart the whole drive, which was, if that was my mother's voice out there, if it had gotten my mother that exactly right, that completely, the name and the gesture and the house coat and the love, how close had it gotten to her? What did it take to learn a person that well? And I had left my mother 11 miles away in a bed all night, while the thing that had learned her poured her voice at my window, and I did not know, driving home in the gray, whether I was going to find her safe or whether I was going to find the worst thing there is. Yolanda was in the kitchen making coffee when I came in the door, and she was fine, and I nearly went down on the floor with the relief of it, and I said, "Mama, is she?" And Yoli said, "She's asleep, she's fine, she's good." And then Yoli got a strange, soft look on her face, and she said the thing that I've carried every day since, the thing that made all of it worse instead of better. "Ronnie," she said, "she had a good night, a real good one. I almost called you." Yoli set down the coffee. Around 3 she woke up, and she was Ronnie. She was herself. Clear as anything. Clearer than I've seen her in 2 years. She sat up, and she knew where she was, and she knew me. She called me Yoli, and she asked for you, by name. She said, "Where's Veronica? I need to tell Veronica something." And I said you were at work, and you'd be home in the morning. And she nodded like she understood, and she looked out the window toward the cinders, toward the field, out east. And she said the strangest thing. She said, and Yoli stopped and rubbed her arms like she was cold. She said, "Tell her I know it's her. Tell her I know her." And then she laid back down and she went to sleep. And she's been peaceful ever since. Isn't that something? After all this time. A good night. Around 3. The exact hour. My mother woke up clear herself, knowing names. At the exact hour, a thing in her housecoat was calling Veronica, "Mija, I know you across the north fence." I have never told Yolanda what that means. I have never told anyone until now. I don't fully know what it means myself. I have stopped trying to know, because every road it leads down is worse than the last. Maybe when the thing put my mother on, some thread of my mother felt it and reached and surfaced and swam up out of the deep place the disease had drowned her in, and knew her daughter was near, and tried to say, "So tell her I know her." Maybe the thing didn't just copy my mother off of me. Maybe it went and got some of her, some real part of her, up out of the ruin to make the mask fit better, and left her lucid and reaching in a bed while it wore the copy out at the fence. Maybe. Or maybe it was just the disease's cruelty lined up with the desert's cruelty, by pure chance, one good night out of 2 years falling on the one night I'd never be able to hear about it without wanting to be sick. I don't know. That's the honest answer, and it's the one I hate. I don't know, and knowing wouldn't help, and I've made myself stop looking. My mother died in May. She had one more clear window before the end. That's how it goes sometimes, they told me, a rallying, a last brightening before it's over. And hers came on a Sunday afternoon in the good chair by the window with the light coming in. And I was there, I was holding her hand, and she turned her head, and she looked at me, and her eyes were her eyes, all the way, my mother's eyes with my mother behind them. And she smiled and she said, "Veronica," my name. My real mother, at the real end, in the real afternoon light, knew me, and said my name, and reached up with a hand that weighed nothing, and touched my face and said, "Mija, te amo." It wasn't yours to carry, any of it, you hear me? It was never yours to carry, the thing I had wanted my whole life, the thing I had prayed for on my knees. My mother, whole, at the last, giving me back Marisol and giving me back myself and setting down the whole 19 years, in her own real voice, with her own real love, in the daylight, home, safe, exactly the way it was supposed to happen. And I flinched. God forgive me, I flinched. My mother touched my face and said te amo, and it wasn't yours to carry. The truest and most real words of my whole life. The words at the actual bedside, in the actual light, and for 1/2 of 1 second, before I could stop it. Some animal part of me that had sat with its back against a steel door until dawn heard the thing at the fence, heard the housecoat gliding along the wire, heard "Come home, Mija." I know you and I flinched away from my own dying mother's hand. She didn't see it. I've told myself 1,000 times she didn't see it. She was too far gone toward the end of that window. Her eyes were already going soft and traveling. I've told myself. But I felt it, the flinch. I felt my own body pull back a 1/4 inch from the one thing I had wanted most on this earth. Because a thing in the cinders had spent a whole winter learning to counterfeit exactly this, and had done it so well that it had ruined the real thing before the real thing even came. Had gotten to my mother's last "I love you" first, and put its mouth on it, so that when the true words finally came I could not receive them clean. It stole the one moment I'd have traded years for. It didn't take me. I kept the door shut. I got back in the truck. I lived. But it reached 19 miles and 2 months forward from that fence, and it took the one thing I had left to lose, which was the ability to be loved by my mother at the end without a monster standing behind it. I held her hand the rest of that afternoon. I said te amo back, and I meant it with everything I have, and I made myself keep my hand still and warm around hers even while the other thing whispered under it, and I like to think that at the very end the love won. That, the last thing that passed between my mother and me, was real, and only real. I like to think that I hold on to it the way she told me to hold on to it wasn't yours to carry. All those years ago, at Marisol's funeral, on her own 2 strong feet. She died 4 days later, in her sleep, at night, while Yolanda sat with her, so that she was not alone, so that she was never once alone, which was the whole thing we'd built, Yoli and me. Across all those hours, my mother died safe in her bed with someone who loved her in the room, exactly the way it should be, exactly the way the thing at the fence was lying when it said, "Come out to the dark," and I will hold on to that too. I quit the solar field the week of the funeral. I don't drive 77 at night anymore. I got day work at the county now, and I sleep when it's dark like a regular person is supposed to, and I don't go out past the pavement after sundown for anything, ever. Gil retired that same summer, and I saw him once more, at the grocery in Cinderdraw, and we stood by the melons, and neither of us said the real thing for a while, and then he said, "You kept the truck on the road." Not a question, and I said I had. And he nodded, and he looked at me a long moment with those flat retired jailer eyes that had seen everything a county has to offer and still didn't believe in ghosts, and he said, "Denny keeps the truck on the road too, up in Flagstaff. Raise that baby into a whole person. You can do the same. You just don't ever go back out there, and you don't ever answer it, and you let the ones you couldn't save be dead, Ronnie, all the way dead, because the dead don't call you out into the cold. Only the hungry thing does that." Then he bought his melon and went home, and I've thought about it every day since. Let the ones you couldn't save be dead, all the way dead, which is the hardest mercy anybody's ever asked of me, and the only one that keeps me alive. But sometimes, on the bad nights, I'll hear a coyote out in the cinders, way off, the real kind, the ordinary kind, singing to the others the way they've always done, the way they did before there was anybody out here to be afraid of them, and I'll get up, and I'll check the lock on my door, and I'll stand there in the dark of my own house with my hand flat on the wood, and I'll say the thing my mother taught me before the cinders ever took her voice. The thing that's the only reason I'm alive to say it. Your people are home. Your people are safe. Whatever calls you out into the dark, no matter whose voice it wears, is not your people, and I don't answer it. Not even hers. Especially not hers. Story 3. The Man Who Beat Me Home. At 2:40 in the morning I called my wife from the station phone to say I loved her, and she answered half asleep and annoyed, and she said, "Eli, why are you calling me, babe? You're right here." I had the phone against my ear. I was standing in the control room at the Ocotillo compressor station, with the compressors going in the next building loud enough to feel in my chest, and the SCADA screens throwing their blue light on the walls. And 53 miles of dark desert between me and the bed my wife was lying in, and my wife said, sleepy, mildly irritated the way you get when somebody wakes you for nothing, "You're right here. Eli, you're in the bed. Stop poking me and go to sleep. You've got the baby at 6. And I heard, down the line, under her voice, the sound of my own house at night. The swamp cooler. The dog shifting on the floor. And then I heard something turn over in the sheets next door, close to the phone, and settle, and let out a long, slow breath. A man's breath. A sleeping man's breath. Right there in my bed next to my wife, 53 miles away, while I stood in a steel room in the desert holding the phone so hard my hand hurt. "Marley," I said. My voice came out wrong. "Marley, who's in the bed?" And there was a silence on the line, and in the silence, the breathing next to her stopped. I'm going to tell you all of it, but I have to go back, because if I just tell you about the phone call, you'll think I'd lost my mind, and I hadn't, not yet. And by the time you understand what I understood, standing in that control room, you'll wish, like I do, that losing my mind was all it had been. My name is Elias Brameli, and for a year and a half I was the night operator at the Ocotillo compressor station out on the Palo Muerto pipeline lateral, which is a fancy way of saying I ran a gas plant by myself in the middle of nowhere from 6 at night to 6 in the morning while my family slept 53 miles away without me. I want to explain the job, because the job is the whole thing. It isn't a side detail. The job is the wound the rest of it crawled into. A compressor station is what keeps gas moving through a pipeline. The gas loses pressure as it travels, so every so often along the line there's a station with big reciprocating compressors engines the size of a pickup truck, a row of them in a metal building that squeeze it back up to pressure and shove it on down the pipe. Ocotillo had 4 of them, and when they were running the whole site roared. A deep hammering roar you stopped hearing after a while, the way you stop hearing your own heart. There was the compressor building, and the control room, where the operator sat with the SCADA, the screens that show you every pressure and temperature and valve on the whole site. And out in the fenced yard there were the gas coolers with their big fans, and the separators, and the pig launcher, and a flare stack that would light up now and then and throw orange light across the whole desert like the world's loneliest bonfire. The nearest town was Palo Muerto, 53 miles south. The nearest anything else was nothing. You could stand in that yard at night and turn a full circle and see not one light that a human being had made, except the ones bolted to the fence around you. I want to tell you about the drive out, because it was part of the job the same as the gauges were, and because it's where the leaving happened, night after night, the actual physical act of it. I'd leave the house at 4:30 in the afternoon, before June's bus even got to the corner, and I'd drive north out of Palo Muerto on the county road, with the sun going down on my left. Out past the last of the town, past the last house, past the last mailbox, out to where the pavement gave up its painted lines and then gave up being pavement, and the desert took over on both sides, the creosote flats and the far bare mountains going purple, and for 53 miles I'd watch my whole life get smaller in the mirror. That's a thing that does something to a man, done every night. You leave while your kids are still at school. You drive an hour into emptiness. You arrive at a loud steel island as the last light goes, and you relieve Sturgis, and you watch his taillights go back down the access road toward the world, toward town, toward where the people are. And then it's you and the compressors and the dark. And the dark out there is not like town dark. It's the real thing. It's the dark that was here before anybody and will be here after. And you spend all night in a box of light in the middle of it, and then you drive the 53 miles back at dawn, and you get home as your kids are eating cereal and going the other way out the door to their day while you go to bed. You are a man permanently going the opposite direction from your own family. You pass them on the stairs. That was the whole architecture of my life for a year and a half, and I built it on purpose, for good reasons, for love even, and every mile of that drive out was a mile of leaving my place empty, and I never once, until the very end, thought of the leaving as a thing I was doing. I thought of it as a thing that was just true, like weather. The job is out there, and the family is back here, and a man goes where the money is. That's not a decision, I'd have told you. That's just how it is. It's a decision. I know that now. Every mile of it is a decision. But you can drive a decision so many nights in a row that it stops feeling like one, and that's the most dangerous thing a road can do to you. I took the job because it paid. That's the plain truth, and I'm not proud of it, and I'm not ashamed of it either. It just is. Marley and I got married young, and we had June faster than we planned, and we were drowning a truck payment and a credit card that had gotten away from us, and rent going up every year on a 2-bedroom in Palo Muerto that had black mold in the bathroom the landlord wouldn't fix. And then Tomas came, our boy, and now it was 2 kids in the moldy 2-bedroom, and I was making $12 an hour at the parts counter at the Napa in town, and there was no version of the math that worked. None. I'd sit at the kitchen table after the kids were down and do the math, and it never once came out to a life. And then Marley's cousin, who worked pipeline, told me they were hiring operators, and that a night operator at a remote station with the differential and the overtime could clear $70,000, $80,000 a year. And I did the new math, and for the first time in my adult life, the math came out to a life, a house, a real house with a yard, out of the mold. College accounts for the kids. Someday. Out from under the truck and the card. All I had to do was go sit in a steel room in the desert every night and watch some gauges. And be gone. Be gone. That was the whole cost, and I told myself it was cheap. 7 nights on, 7 off. On my 7 off, I'd be super dad. I told Marley. I'd be there for everything. And on my 7 on, I'd be a set of headlights leaving the driveway at 4:30 in the afternoon before June even got home from school, and a truck pulling back in at 7:30 in the morning while the kids ate cereal. A man who kissed his children on the tops of their heads on his way to bed and slept through their whole day and got up as they were getting home to leave again. 7 nights running, every other week, I was a hole in that house, the exact shape of a husband and a father. I was a name the kids said about somebody who was asleep behind a closed door, or gone. I need you to feel the weight of that, the ordinary crushing weight of it, because it's the thing that let the other thing in, and it's a weight that a lot of people carry and never say out loud. I missed June lose her first tooth. I was asleep behind the blackout curtain, and Marley didn't want to wake me because I'd worked all night. And by the time I got up, it was old news. The tooth was in a baggie, the excitement was over, and my daughter told me about it the way you tell a neighbor. I missed Tomas start to walk. Marley took a video on her phone, which is a mercy, and is also its own small knife, watching a video of your son's first steps in the break room of a gas plant at 3 in the morning on your day 2 of 7. I miss birthdays that fell on the wrong week. I miss the ordinary nightly things most of all, though bath time, the reading of the one more book, the getting up with the baby when he cried, the being there in the dark of the house when one of them woke scared. Marley did all of it. All the nights. Alone, every other week, while I earned the down payment. And here's the part I have to be honest about, the part that matters. I wasn't good on my 7 off. I told myself I'd be super dad, and I wasn't. I was tired in a way that 7 days doesn't fix. Tired in my bones, tired in my patience, and I was on my phone too much. Scrolling, checking the account balance, climb like it was a video game. And when the baby cried at night, On my nights home, I'd pretend to be asleep and let Marley get him because she was used to it, and that became a fight, a quiet, ongoing fight. Marley saying, "You're home, but you're not here, Eli," and me saying, "I'm exhausted. Marley, I'm doing this for you, for all of you," and both of us being right, which is the worst kind of fight there is. "You're home, but you're not here." She said that to me in February. Standing in the kitchen with the baby on her hip and June's lunch half made and me on the couch with my phone. "You're home, but you're not here. Remember it. It matters more than almost anything else I'm going to tell you, because something out in the desert was listening to my life, the way it listens to everybody's, and of all the things it could have learned about me, that's the one it learned best. That I left a hole. That even when I was there, I left a hole. It found the hole, and it was exactly its size. I want to give you one night at home, a real one, so the hole isn't just a word. This was a night on my 7 off in that same February, and it was nothing. It was the most ordinary bad night a tired family ever had, and that's exactly why it matters. Tomas was teething and up every couple hours, and I had it in my head that since I was home, I'd take a night so Marley could sleep for once. I'd be the good one. I'd earn back some of your home, but you're not here. And I meant it going in. But the first time he woke, around midnight, I was already asleep on my back the way I sleep when the bone tired is on me, and I heard him start up down the hall, and I thought, I'll go in a second. Just let me get my eyes open. And I lay there getting my eyes open, and I heard Marley sigh in the dark next to me and push the covers back, and I said, "Thick, I got him." I said I'd get him, and Marley said, "It's fine, you're tired, go back to sleep." And the thing is, she meant it kind, but there was a whole year and a half in how fast she said it, a whole year and a half of her already knowing I wasn't going to get up, of it being easier to just do it than to wait through my getting my eyes open. And she got up, and I let her the way I'd let her 100 times. And I lay there in the dark, hating myself, for about 90 seconds. And then I was asleep again, because that's the trick of it. The self-hatred doesn't keep you up. Only the baby does. And the baby wasn't mine that night. The baby was hers. The baby was always hers. And June came in at some point, the way she does, padded in the dark and stood by my side of the bed, and I felt her there, and I said, "What's up, bug?" And she said she'd had a bad dream, and I said, "Climb in," and I meant to talk to her, to hold her a minute, to be her dad about it. And I was asleep before she got the blanket up. I know because she told Marley in the morning not to tattle, just reporting the weather of her life. She said Daddy fell asleep when I was still talking. And Marley told me, not mad, just tired. And that was the whole conversation. Daddy fell asleep when I was still talking. And I laughed it off. Because what else do you do? And I filed it under Tired Dad. And I did not understand that I was, night by night, ordinary moment by ordinary moment, teaching my whole family not to reach for me. Teaching them that the space where I was supposed to be would not answer if they reached into it. So they'd best learn to stop reaching. That's a hole you dig with 1,000 small kindnesses to yourself. Go back to sleep, you're tired. I got him, no. It's fine. Each one nothing. Each one a spade full. That was the shape of me at home. And it found the hole, and it was exactly its size. The station had been operating for 11 years, and I was the 4th night man to hold the job, and I know that because of the logbooks, which I'll get to, because the logbooks turned out to matter. The other operator was Sturgis, Roy Sturgis. He ran the day shift, 6 to 6 the other way, and we overlapped for a few minutes at the gate at each end, a handoff. And Sturgis had been doing remote stations for 30 years, all over the West, and he was the most closed-up man I ever met. Not unfriendly, just done with talking, the way some men who've spent their lives alone in loud places get done with it. He'd tell me the state of the plant in about 9 words, and get in his truck and go. It took me 4 months to get a full sentence out of him that wasn't about compressor discharge temps. The sentence I finally got, I'll never forget, because it was the first warning and I didn't know it was a warning. It was maybe my 5th month, and I made some comment at the handoff about how quiet it got out here at night, how a man could go a little stir-crazy, and I laughed, and Sturgis didn't laugh. He stood there by his truck in the gray dawn with his thermos, and he looked at me for a while, and then he said, "It's not quiet at night. That's your mistake right there. You think it's quiet?" He got in his truck, and through the open window, before he pulled out, he said the thing. "You do your walks. You keep your eyes on the plant, not out past the fence. And whatever you think you see out past the fence, you leave it out there. You don't go to it, and you don't talk back to it, and you for damn sure don't tell it about yourself. It'll want to know about you. Don't tell it anything." And he drove off down the access road, and I stood there thinking Roy Sturgis has been alone too long. That's what 30 years of night stations does to a man. And I filed it away under Sad Old Hermit, and I went home to my family and didn't think about it again for a while. The logbooks I found in the fall. Every station keeps a log. You write down your rounds, your readings, anything abnormal, hour by hour, shift by shift, and the books fill up and get stuck on a shelf in the control room, and new ones started, going back to the day the station opened. Green cloth-bound books, dozens of them, a paper history of 11 years of men sitting in that room through the night. And one slow night I pulled the old ones down out of boredom, just to read what the guys before me had written, the way you'd read a stranger's diary. And mostly it was exactly as boring as you'd think. Discharge temps and oil changes and gas readings and a row of different handwritings, but not all of it, because scattered through 11 years of gas readings, in the small hours, in the 2 to 4 dead spots, the men who sat in that room had written other things. Not every night, not even most, but enough. Little notes in the margins, in between the readings, in the private language of men who couldn't say a thing straight out, but couldn't quite not say it either. Coyote at the flare again. Stood up when the light hit it. I know how that sounds. Heard the day man's voice out in the yard at 3. Sturgis was home in bed. Called him to make sure. He wasn't happy I called. "Do not answer the gate intercom after 2 a.m. I don't care who it sounds like." And that one was underlined hard twice. And in a different hand, older, faded from the early years, a whole paragraph squeezed into the bottom margin of a page that I read 4 times, sitting in that blue light with the compressors hammering next door. If you are reading the old books, it is because it has started on you too. So here is what I know and what got passed to me. It cannot come in. It has to be invited, or it has to find a place already empty and yours to fill. It will learn you all the way down. It will find the person you are supposed to be and are not, the place in your own life you have left empty, and it will offer to fill it, or it will just fill it. Do not let it. Keep your place filled yourself, however you can. The day you stop filling your own place is the day it moves in. God help the married ones. God help the ones with kids. It's worst for us. We've got the most places to leave empty. No name on it. Just that. God help the married ones. And I sat there, a married one, with 2 kids 53 miles away, and a wife who'd told me in February, "You're home, but you're not here." And I felt something walk up my spine that the compressors couldn't drown out, and then I did what I always did. I told myself a lonely man wrote it, some poor guy who cracked out here, and I put the book back on the shelf. But I didn't put it all the way back. I left it out, where I could see it. I think part of me had already started keeping its secrets the way you do. The first wrong thing at the station itself was the coyote at the flare, and I'll tell it fast because it's the one that reads most like a story a lonely man tells himself. And then I'll tell you the ones that don't. The flare stack at Alcatia would light off now and then, burning off gas. A tall orange flame up on the stack that threw moving light across the whole yard and out into the desert past the fence. And one night in October, the flare was going, and I was at the control room window watching it the way you watch a fire. And out past the fence, at the edge of where the flare light reached, there was a coyote sitting, watching the flame or watching the station. Hard to say. Nothing wrong with that. And then the flame guttered and flared back up brighter, and in the brighter light the coyote stood up on its hind legs, all the way up, stood up like a man, and held it tall, too tall, its front legs hanging down, its head level, standing at the edge of the firelight looking at the station. And it stayed up like that for as long as the flare burned bright. 10 seconds, 15. A coyote standing upright at the edge of the desert, watching me watch it. And then the flare dropped back down to its low burn, and the bright went out of the yard, and in the low light the shape was on all fours again, trotting off, unhurried, and I stood at the window and told myself about angles and firelight and a coyote reaching up after something, the same lies you tell yourself, and I wrote nothing in the log. But I remembered the logbook. Coyote at the flare again, stood up when the light hit it. I know how that sounds. Some man years before me had watched the exact same thing from the exact same window and reached for the exact same lie and not quite been able to keep it. I know how that sounds. That's a man who saw it and needed you to know he wasn't crazy, writing to a stranger he'd never meet, across years in the only place he had. The gate intercom was worse, because there is no angle of the firelight for a voice. Alcatello's front gate was a good 100 yards from the control room, out at the end of the access road, chained at night, with a call box on a post so a delivery or a repair crew could buzz the operator. It buzzed, maybe once a week in daylight. It had never once buzzed at night, because nothing comes to a compressor station at night. There's no reason, there's nothing out there. And one night in November, this was around when the lost time started, I've stopped being able to keep the order perfectly straight, which I think is part of what it does to you. The gate intercom buzzed at 3:10 in the morning. I about came out of my chair. I looked at the gate camera, the little black and white feed, and there was nothing at the gate. Empty road, chained gate, the call box on its post, nobody. And it buzzed again, and a voice came out of the control room speaker through the intercom from the empty gate 100 yards away, and it said, "Hey boss, you gotta let me in. I'm freezing out here." A man's voice, friendly, ordinary, the voice of a repair guy who'd had a long night. "Come on, Eli, open the gate, it's cold." It knew my name. There was nobody at the gate, and the voice knew my name, and it was already, that early, working on the one thing it wanted, which is the thing they all want. The thing Sturgis warned me about, and the logbook underlined twice. "Open the gate, open the door, let me in." And, I remembered the underlined line, "Do not answer the gate intercom after 2 a.m. I don't care who it sounds like. And I did not key the intercom back. I did not answer it. I sat in the control room and I watched the empty gate on the little screen, and I listened to a friendly voice come out of the speaker for the better part of an hour. "Freezing out here. Come on, boss. I know you're in there. I can see the light. Just crack the gate, patient. Never angry, so reasonable." Until a little after 4 it stopped, and the yard was quiet, and I sat there till dawn, not moving. And that was the first night I understood, in my body and not just my head, that the thing in the logbook was real, and that it was mine now, and that it had started. The wrong things at home, though those started smaller and out of order. I'll tell you, the first one wasn't at the station at all. It was on my 7 off, and I didn't even clock it as wrong until much later. It was June. June was 7 that fall, my girl, gap-toothed and serious and a great noticer of things, the way 7-year-olds are. And one morning at breakfast on my week home, she was doing a drawing, and she slid it across the table to show me, proud, and it was our family. Stick figures in front of the house. Marley and June and the baby and the dog and me. And next to me, holding my other hand, there was another figure the same size as me, the same brown scribble of hair, the same blue for a shirt. "Who's that bug?" I said. "Next to Daddy." And June looked at the drawing and looked at me and got a small confused line between her eyebrows, like I'd asked her something with an obvious answer, like I'd pointed at the dog and asked, "Who's that?" And she said, "That's Daddy too." "There's 2 daddies? There's the day daddy and the night daddy?" June said, matter of fact, already bored of the question, going back to her crayons. Night Daddy comes when you're at work. He does the bath. He's not tired like you. And she colored in the second figure's blue shirt, and she said, not looking up, in the terrible offhand way kids say the thing that stops your heart, I like Night Daddy. He's more fun. He's not always on his phone. I laughed. God forgive me, I laughed, because that's what you do. You laugh. And Marley came in and I said, June's got an imaginary friend. It's me. Apparently there's a night version of me who does bath and isn't on his phone. And I said it as a joke on myself, self-deprecating, a tired dad ribbing himself. And Marley didn't laugh. Marley got a funny look and she said, huh. And something moved behind her eyes. And then Tomas knocked his cup over and the moment went to the floor with the milk. And I didn't think about it again for weeks. An imaginary friend. Kids have them. A night daddy who does the bath and isn't tired and isn't on his phone. Of course she made him up. She made up the father she wanted out of the pieces the real one wasn't giving her, and any parent would tell you that's normal, that's just imagination, that's nothing. That's what I told myself. It's what you tell yourself. You've always got the ordinary explanation loaded and ready, because the ordinary explanation lets you keep your family the shape you think it is one more day. And then the thing I couldn't explain, the thing that should have sent me home that very week, was that Marley got happy. I'd call from the station on my 7-on nights, early, before the kids went down, to say goodnight. That was the one nightly thing I could still do. A phone call at 7:30 from a break room. And over that winter, the calls started to feel different. And it took me a while to understand the difference was that my wife had stopped being tired at me. She'd been tired at me for a year and a half. That low, patient tiredness of a woman doing it all alone. And I'd gotten so used to it I didn't hear it anymore until it was gone. And that winter it was gone. She'd get on the phone light, almost girlish, the way she'd been when we were first married, and she'd say things that landed sweet in the moment and only turned to ice much later when I understood them. The kids are so good lately, she said once. You've been so good with them lately, babe. I don't know what changed, but keep doing it. I hadn't changed anything. I was 53 miles away in a steel room. But I took the compliment. God help me. I took it warm. Because a man who's been your home but you're not here for 18 months will take a kind word from his wife, any way it comes, and not look at the return address. June didn't want to get off the phone with you last night, she said another time, and I said, what phone call? I didn't call last night. I was slammed. The compressors. And there was the littlest pause on the line, the littlest hitch. And then Marley laughed and said, oh right, sorry, I'm losing my mind. It must have been the night before. And we both let it go, both of us, because both of us wanted to. Because the alternative to letting it go was a question neither of us was ready to ask. What phone call? There'd been a phone call to my house, to my daughter, that I hadn't made, and June hadn't wanted to hang up, and my wife and I heard that fact land in the middle of the conversation, and we each picked up an ordinary explanation and set it down on top of the fact like a napkin over a stain, and we kept talking. That's how it works on a family. It doesn't kick the door in. It gives everybody a reason to look away, and everybody takes it, because looking away is so much easier than what looking would cost. The dog knew. I'll say that, for whatever it's worth. We had an old shepherd mix named Rufus. June named him, and Rufus loved me, had loved me since before the kids. And that winter Marley mentioned that Rufus had started sleeping in the garage. Wouldn't come in the house at night anymore. Stood at the back door and wouldn't come through it, and if you carried him in he'd go stiff and low and back out. And he'd taken to sleeping in the garage on the concrete in the cold rather than in the house he'd slept in his whole life. And the vet said sometimes old dogs get funny, and Marley said it like it was a cute, sad thing about getting old. And I laughed and said, poor old Rufus. And I did not hear it. I did not hear that my dog, who loved me, would not be in the house at night anymore, because there was something in the house at night, wearing my smell and my face, that an animal which cannot be given an ordinary explanation to look away with knew in one sniff was not me and was not right and was not to be near. Rufus knew in October what I didn't let myself know until February. Animals can't lie to themselves. That's the one advantage they've got on us, and it's a big one. June said one more thing, in January, that I put in the same drawer as all the rest and only took back out after. She was in the bath on a phone call. Marley had me on speaker while she did bath time, and June said, out of nowhere, in that bath time dreamy way, "Daddy, do you like being two?" And Marley said, "What, baby?" And June said, "Not you, Mama. Daddy. Do you like being two daddies? Is it hard?" And there was a silence on the line, and Marley's voice came back, "Careful, too careful. Honey, there's only one daddy. He's on the phone. Say goodnight." And June said goodnight, easy, untroubled. The kid who'd asked a normal question and gotten a weird grown-up answer and moved on. And I sat in the break room at the station with the phone in my hand and the compressors hammering through the wall, and I did not say anything because there wasn't anything to say that wouldn't crack the world, and I was not ready yet to crack the world. Do you like being two daddies? Is it hard? My 7-year-old, who saw both of us, who'd been seeing both of us for months, asking the night version of her father, kindly, whether the arrangement was hard on him. At the station, the wrong things had a different flavor, and the first one I couldn't explain away was the lost time. An operator's night has a shape. You do rounds every 2 hours. You walk the whole plant with a flashlight and a clipboard, check the compressors, read the local gauges, look and listen and smell for anything the computer can't tell you, and you log it. 2, 4, 6 rounds a night, depending. In between, you sit in the control room and you watch the screens and you fight sleep. And the log is the proof of your night, the hour-by-hour proof that you were awake and doing your job, which matters because a compressor station is a thing that can kill a lot of people if the man running it falls asleep at the wrong second. And one night in November, I came back to myself in the control room. That's the only way I can say it. Came back to myself the way you do when you've been driving and you realize you don't remember the last 10 miles and it was 4:15 in the morning, and the last thing in my log was the 2 o'clock round, and there was nothing after it, a blank. 2 hours and 15 minutes of blank, and I could not remember 1 second of it. Not falling asleep, not sitting there, nothing. Just 2 o'clock, and then 4:15. With a hole punched clean through the middle where my night should have been. I told myself I'd microslept, which is a real thing, a dangerous thing, and I got scared in the ordinary way, the way you get scared about your job. And I bought bigger coffee, and I set alarms on my phone to keep me up. But here's the part the coffee didn't fix. When I pulled up the SCADA history for that blank 2 hours to see if anything had happened while I was under, the log showed activity. Somebody had been running the plant. There were manual valve adjustments, a cooler fan cycled, a routine logged and cleared operator actions, my operator actions. Under my login, time stamped through the exact 2 hours I could not remember existing. Somebody had sat in my chair and run my plant with my hands and my password while I was gone from myself, and done it competently, better than competently, and left no trace except a blank in the paper log where a man's own account of his night is supposed to go. It happened again in December, then twice in 1 week in January. Always the 2 to 4, the dead time, the deep of it. I'd surface at the far end with hours gone, and the SCADA showing a night's work done by somebody who wasn't me, or wasn't the me that remembered. And I started to understand, in a place under my thinking, that the blanks at the station lined up with something, though I didn't let myself finish the thought. I didn't let myself get out my 7-on calendar and lay it next to anything. Not yet. The voices in the yard came in December, too. I was on my 4 o'clock round, out by the gas coolers, flashlight going, and I heard Sturgis. Roy Sturgis, the day man, plain as anything, over by the pig launcher, saying my name. Eli. Just that, in Roy's flat, done-with talking voice. And I about jumped out of my skin, because for a second I thought he'd come back for something. And then the animal part of me remembered that Roy Sturgis was home in bed 53 miles away, that there was no truck at the gate, that I'd have heard a truck, that I was alone inside a locked fence in the middle of the desert and a voice had just said my name. And I remembered the logbook heard the dayman's voice out in the yard at 3. And I remembered Sturgis's own warning, "You don't talk back to it," and I did not answer. And I walked back to the control room, not running, because I had the sense, the deep sense, that running would tell it something, and I locked the door, and I finished my shift inside, and I did not do my 6 o'clock round. I logged it as done, and I lied, and that was the first time I lied in the log, and it would not be the last. I told Sturgis. At the handoff, "Careful," I said. "You ever hear things out here? Somebody said this station's got a reputation." And Roy Sturgis looked at me for a long moment in the dawn, and he said, "You started hearing me, didn't you?" Not a question. And when I didn't answer, he nodded, slow, and he said the most he ever said to me at once, and I'm going to give it to you whole because I've turned it over 1,000 times. "It does the day man first, usually," Sturgis said. "For the night, guys, because I'm the one voice out here you know but aren't attached to. It's testing the tool. It's seeing, does the copy work on you before it spends the copy on somebody that matters. It'll do me, and then a dispatcher maybe, and then he stopped, and he looked out at the desert going gold, and his jaw worked, and then it'll do the ones you love. That's the direction it goes. Stranger to acquaintance to family. It climbs up your life toward the middle of you, and you'll know it's getting close to the middle of you when it stops happening out here." He looked at me hard. "You listening? When it stops. When the yard goes quiet again and you start to think it's over, you think, thank God it's over. That's not it leaving, Eli. That's it getting to where it was going. It goes quiet out here because it's not out here anymore. It found the empty place it was looking for, and it moved in, and the empty place is never out here. The empty place is wherever you're not." He got in his truck. "You got kids," he said. It wasn't a question either. "Yeah, you got the look. God help you." And he drove off, and 3 weeks later, the yard went quiet. That's the thing I want you to feel. 3 weeks later, the voices stopped. The lost time stopped. The standing coyote at the flare stopped coming. The whole station went back to being just a loud, lonely box in the desert. And I sat in it night after night in January, and I felt the relief come up in me warm and total thank God it's over. It got bored, it moved on, and every time the relief came, Sturgis's voice came right behind it. That's not it leaving, that's it getting to where it was going. The empty place is wherever you're not. And where was I not? I was not home. Every night I sat in that quiet station being relieved it was over. I was 53 miles from a house with my wife and my kids in it. A house with a me-shaped hole in it. A hole a wife had named, out loud, in her own kitchen. "You're home, but you're not here." A hole a 7-year-old had drawn a second daddy into and colored his shirt blue. The station going quiet wasn't mercy. The station going quiet meant it had climbed all the way up my life, to the middle of me, past the day, man, and the strangers, up to the exact center, and it had found the emptiest place I owned, which was my own place, the husband and the father I kept promising to be, and kept being too tired and too gone to be, and it had moved in. And I knew it. That's the thing. By late January, some part of me knew exactly what the quiet meant. And I did not drive home, because to drive home I'd have to abandon the station, which was a firing, which was the end of the house, and the down payment, and the math that finally came out to a life, and because, if I'm honest, all the way honest, Some coward part of me did not want to see. Some part of me thought, they're happy. Marley sounds happy on the phone lately. June sounds happy. Whatever's filling my place is filling it better than I did. Maybe I should just... And I never finished that thought either. But it was in me. God help me. It was in me. The thought that maybe the hole was better filled by the thing than by me. And that thought is the closest I ever came to losing everything. Closer than the drive home. Closer than the window. The night I let myself think maybe they're better off, I had already half invited it to stay. Which brings me to the phone call. Which is where I started. I called at 2:40 because I couldn't stand it anymore. That's the truth. I had been sitting in the quiet station for hours with Sturgis's words going around and around. The empty places wherever you're not. And I needed to hear my wife's voice and know she was there. Real. In our bed. Safe. Ordinary. So I picked up the station landline and I called the house. And Marley answered, thick with sleep and annoyed. And she said the words that took the floor out of the world. You're right here, Eli. You're in the bed. Stop poking me and go to sleep. And I heard the breathing next to her. And I said, Marley, who's in the bed? And the breathing stopped. And there was a silence. And then Marley's voice changed. The sleep went out of it. And something younger and more frightened came into it. A little girl's confusion in a grown woman's voice. And she said, Eli, what's your babe? You're right here. I can feel you. And I heard the sheets move. I heard her hand moving on the bed next to her, patting the warm shape of a sleeping man. You're right here. Why does the phone say the station? Why is your side of the bed? And then she made a sound I have never heard my wife make before or since. A small sound. The sound of a person's mind arriving somewhere it can't be. And she whispered, Eli, there's somebody in the bed. There's somebody in the bed and he's got your... And the line went dead. Not hung up. Dead. The dial tone didn't even come. Just gone. The way a line goes when something's cut it. And I stood in the control room with a dead phone against my ear and the SCADA screens glowing and the plant humming its quiet January hum. 53 miles of black desert between me and my family. And I did the thing that ended my career and saved their lives. I abandoned the station. You don't do that. You do not walk off and leave a manned compressor station running unmanned. It's about the worst thing an operator can do. It's a federal paperwork firing, and it's dangerous. And I did it without a second's thought. I set the plant to its safest automatic state, and I ran to my truck, and I drove out the gate and down the access road and onto the highway toward Palo Muerto at 90 miles an hour, with my hands shaking on the wheel. 53 miles, and I have never in my life been so far from anywhere. The desert went by black on both sides. There was no other car. Just my headlights and the road, and the worst hour of my life stretched out 53 miles long, and the whole way I prayed, which I don't do, and the whole way one thing beating me like a second heart. I left the place empty. I left the place empty every single night. Whatever's in my bed, I made room for it. I made room for it with my own two hands, one shift at a time, for a year and a half. 20 miles out, where there's a little rise on the highway and my phone finally caught a bar of signal, I called the house again. I don't know what I thought I'd do. I just needed to hear the line be alive. It rang twice, and it picked up, and a voice said, hello? My voice? It was my voice. Calm, a little tired, the ordinary way you answer a phone at 3 in the morning. My own voice, out of my own house, answering my own phone. And it said, hello? Babe, is that you? Where are you calling from? And there was something almost tender in it, something patient. The tone I use. The tone I'd use if my wife called confused in the night. And I understood I was hearing myself be a better version of myself down a phone line, a me that answers gently in the dark, and I couldn't make a sound. I sat there doing 90 with the phone against my ear, not breathing, and my own voice waited a moment and then said, soft, it's okay. Everybody's fine here. Drive safe. And it hung up. It told me to drive safe. It hung up on me gently and told me to drive safe, in my own voice, from inside my own house, with my wife and my kids in it, and I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and I drove. The desert went by black on both sides. There was no other car, the whole 53 miles, not one, like the road had been cleared for just me and the thing I was driving toward. And the flare stack of some other station burned way off to the west like a candle at the bottom of a well. And I thought about all the men in all the green logbooks, all the night men who'd sat in that steel room and felt the yard go quiet, and felt the relief and let it ride, gone home tired at the end of their 7 and never known, never driven home in the dead middle of a shift, like a crazy man. And I understood I was about to find out what they'd all chosen not to find out, and that there was no one finding it once found. I made the 53 miles in a little over half an hour. It felt like a week. I killed the headlights a block from the house, and I coasted up and I got out quiet. And I want to tell you what I saw through my own front window, because it's the thing I see now every time I close my eyes. And it is not what you're braced for. You're braced for blood, for a monster over my sleeping wife. It wasn't that. It was so much worse than that, because it was gentle. The living room lamp was on, the low one, and there, in the yellow light, in the chair by the window, my chair was me, Elias Bram. Sitting in my chair in the middle of the night in a blue shirt, and against my shoulder, wrapped in the green blanket with the trucks on it, was my son, Tomas. Awake, fussing the quiet pre-cry fuss he does, and the man in the chair, me, it was me, my face, my hair, my hands. The man in the chair was walking him without getting up, that little bounce you do in the chair, and he was singing. I couldn't hear it through the glass, but I could see his mouth making the words, slow, patient, and I knew the song by the shape of it, because it was the one Marley sang, the bedtime one, the one I never learned, because I was never up for the nights, and the baby was settling against him, going quiet, going heavy, the boneless heavy of a baby giving up the fight, and going to sleep against a chest he trusted. And down the hall, in the doorway, in her nightgown, stood June, my girl, watching the man in the chair sing her brother down, and on her face was a thing I had not put there in a long time, maybe ever. Peace. Safety. The face of a child who knows, all the way down in the place where kids know things, that the grown-up in the room has got it handled, that she can go back to bed because Daddy's up with the baby. Daddy's got it. Everything's fine. Night Daddy. The one who does the bath. The one who isn't tired. The one who isn't always on his phone. The father I drew on the calendar with my absence and never once managed to be in the flesh, sitting in my chair in the lamplight, being him perfectly, easily, while my real son fell asleep on his shoulder, and my real daughter watched from the hall with her whole small body unclenched. I stood outside my own window in the cold, and I understood the thing all the way to the bottom. It hadn't broken in. There was no broken lock, no forced door, no invitation I could point to and say, there, that's my mistake. I'd never have made it. The mistake was 1.5 years long. The mistake was every headlight leaving that driveway at 4:30, every kiss on the top of a head on my way to bed, every night on the couch on my phone while Marley did the bath, every I'm home but I'm not here. I had built the hole with my own life, dug it a little deeper every single night, a perfect me-shaped emptiness in the middle of my own family, and nature hates a hole, and the desert had been watching, patient, for 1.5 years, learning the exact dimensions of the space I kept leaving, and one night it had simply stepped into it, because I'd made it so easy, because I'd made it so wide, because a place a man keeps that empty, that reliably, is not really his anymore, and something out there knew it before I did. I went in. I want to be careful here, because Sturgis was right about a lot of things, and he was right about this. You don't beat it by fighting it. There was no fighting it. It had my face and my voice, and it was better than me. And if it had come down to which of us was the better husband, the better father, the one the family should keep, I would have lost. I would have deserved to lose. I went in the front door, and it didn't even startle. It looked up from the baby, my own face looking back at me across my own living room, calm, kind, a little sad for me, and it said soft, so as not to wake the baby it was holding, hey, it's okay. You should be at work. And that was the most frightening thing it said all night, because it wasn't a threat. It was true. It was concerned for me. You should be at work. Go back. I've got this. I've got them. Go earn the money. That's your part. And I'll do the part you were never any good at. It was offering to let me keep being what I had chosen to be, the wallet, the headlights, the hole, and it would keep being what I had failed to be, a clean trade. And the horror of it, the real horror, is that for 1 second, standing in my own doorway, I felt the pull of the trade. They were happy. Look how happy. Who was I to walk in and wreck it? June saw me then. She came a step out of the hall. She looked at the man in the chair, and she looked at me in the doorway. And her little face did the most terrible thing. It went from peace to confusion to fear, because there were two of us, two daddies, the drawing come true, and she didn't know. My own daughter stood in the hall and did not know which one was hers. And the thing in the chair said, "Gentle, it's okay, Bug. Go on back to bed. Daddy's here," in the voice. The night daddy voice, the patient one, the one she loved. And June took a step toward it, and that's what saved me. Not courage, watching my daughter take a step toward the thing wearing my face, because it had been more of a father to her than I had that broke something loose in me, and what came out wasn't fear, and it wasn't a fight. What came out was the thing I'd been withholding for a year and a half. I crossed the room. I didn't touch it, didn't grab it. I went past it, to my son, and I put my hands on my sleeping boy, and I took him gently, so gently, off its shoulder and against my own chest. And Tomas woke and looked up at me and did not cry. He knew me. Some deep part of my baby knew his father, and he settled against me. And I sat down on the floor right there with him, and I started to sing the bedtime song, the one I never learned. And I didn't know it. I got the words wrong. I stumbled through it terrible and off-key, with tears running down my face. But I sang it. I did the thing. I filled the place with my own body and my own broken voice. I stopped being the whole and started being the father, right there on the living room floor at 3 a.m, badly, for real, present. And I said out loud to my son and my daughter and the thing in my chair and the whole dark house, "I'm here. I've got him. I'm his father. This is my place. I'm here." And the thing in the chair had nowhere to be. That's the only way I can say it. It's a thing with no self, that lives in the empty places, and I had just walked into the emptiest place I owned and filled it with myself, claimed it out loud, put my flesh where the hole had been, and it had no shape to hold anymore, because the shape was mine and I'd come back for it. I didn't see it leave. I was looking at my son. June told me after that it just wasn't in the chair anymore. That 1 second there were two daddies, and the next there was one, the one on the floor singing wrong. And she came and got down on the floor with me and put her arms around my neck, and Marley came running down the hall, having finally clawed up out of whatever sleep it had kept her under. And the four of us ended up in a pile on the living room floor in the lamplight, all of us crying except the baby, who'd gone back to sleep against my chest like nothing at all had happened, like his father had always been the one to hold him in the night. I lost the job. Of course I lost the job. You abandon a manned station, you're done, and I was done, and the down payment stopped where it was, which wasn't enough, and we didn't get the house that year. And we stayed in the 2-bedroom with the mold 1 more year, while I found work in town, days, at a tire place, for a lot less money. And it was the best trade I ever made, and I'd make it again 1,000 times, and I need you to understand that it wasn't close. Because here's what I learned. Standing on my own living room floor, with my son on my chest, the empty place is wherever you're not. Sturgis meant it as a warning about a monster, and it is that, but it's the other thing too, the true thing under the scary thing. Wherever you're not, something else will be. If you leave a hole in the middle of your family, the exact shape of yourself, night after night, year after year, something is going to fill it. Maybe it's a thing out of the desert with no face. Maybe it's just the slow, ordinary drift of a wife who learns to do it all alone, and a daughter who stops expecting you, and a son who bonds to the person who's actually there. The monster just made it fast and made it visible, and I have spent every day since being grateful to it in a way I can't fully explain, because most men who leave that hole never get to see the thing that moves into it. Most men just wake up one day to a family that reorganized itself around their absence, and they never know why, and they call it growing apart. I got to see mine sitting in my chair singing my son to sleep. I got the mercy of the horror. Not everybody does. Roy Sturgis retired that spring. I called him once to tell him what happened, and he listened to the whole thing without a word, and at the end he said, "You filled your place. Good. That's the only thing that ever works." And then he said, "Quiet, most of them don't. Most of them I've watched over 30 years. They hear the yard go quiet, and they feel that relief, and they let it ride, because seeing means giving something up. And they've all got their reasons, same as you had yours. Good reasons, real reasons, money reasons. And they keep the job, and they keep the money, and something else keeps their family. You're the first one I ever knew that drove home. He was quiet a while. You take care of your place, Eli. You stay in it, because it doesn't die. Understand me? It doesn't die. It just goes back out to the dark, and it waits. And it is patient past anything you can imagine. And it will feel it the day you start leaving that place empty again, one late night at a time, one phone on the couch at a time. That's all it needs. It doesn't need you gone 53 miles. It just needs you not there. And it will come back and try the chair again. It never stops being ready. The only thing that beats it is you never stopping either. I stay in my place now. June doesn't draw the two daddies anymore. I checked, in a coward's way, a few months after I went through her drawing pile one afternoon, the whole fat stack of them, looking for the second figure with the blue shirt. And it wasn't there. Not in any of the new ones. Just the one daddy now, holding one of her hands, Marley holding the other, the baby and the dog in the house. One of me. And I sat on the floor of my daughter's room with that stack of paper, and I cried the way you cry when the worst thing didn't happen, which is a different cry than any other. And June came in and found me and asked what was wrong, and I said, "Nothing, Bug. Daddy's just happy." And she looked at me for a second with those serious 7-year-old eyes that see everything. And then she climbed into my lap and let me hold her, and she didn't fall asleep while I was still talking, and I didn't fall asleep either. I stayed awake for every second of it. That's the whole of what I've got to give her in the end, staying awake for it. It doesn't sound like much. It's everything. It's the only thing that was ever the difference between the man in the chair and me. I'm there for the baths. I learned the song, the whole song, the right words, and I sing it every night I'm home, which is every night now. I get up with Tomas when he cries, and I put my phone in a drawer at 6 o'clock, and when June has something to show me, I put down whatever's in my hands, and I look at it like it's the only thing in the world, because for that minute it has to be, because I've seen what moves into the space where a father's attention is supposed to be and isn't. We're not rich. We may never get the house. Marley and I are better than we've ever been, but I still catch her sometimes watching me across a room with a shadow behind her eyes, and I know what she's remembering, and I don't blame her, because she felt it in the bed next to her, warm breathing, wearing my face, and there is no all the way back from that, not really. We just go forward and don't talk about it and hold on. Rufus came back in the house, though. That's how I know I'm really the one in the chair now, better than any test a person could give me. It took a few weeks after that night, but one evening the old dog stood at the back door, the way he'd been standing at it for months, low and stiff, ready to back out, and then he lifted his head, and he came through slow, and he crossed the kitchen to where I was sitting on the floor with the baby, and he smelled me a long time. My hands, my face, the whole of me, taking his time about it, the way a dog does when he's deciding something. And then he let out a breath and lay down against my leg, with his back to the door, guarding nothing, easy, home, and he slept in the house every night since. A dog can't lie to himself, and a dog can't be fooled. When Rufus lay down against my leg, I knew the man in that chair was me, all the way me, and that I'd stayed me by staying in it. If you ever want to know whether you're really home, whether you're really in your own place, or just occupying it, find the one creature in your life that can't be given a reason to look away, and watch what it does when you come through the door. But some nights, on the bad nights, when I'm tired in my bones, the old way and the couch and the phone are calling, and it would be so easy, just for an hour, to check out, to not be here while I'm here. I feel it. Out past the edge of town, out in the dark where the desert starts. Patient, waiting, feeling for the first soft spot, the first hour I leave my chair empty. It's out there right now. It knows my face. It knows my son's weight, and my daughter's name, and the song I finally learned, and it is never, ever going to stop being ready to sit back down in that chair the second I get up out of it for good. So I don't get up. That's the whole of it. That's the only thing that ever works. I stay in my place. I stay in it, and I stay in it, and every night that I stay in it is a night the chair is mine, and I fill it with my own body until my kids are asleep and the house is quiet and safe, and then I check the locks, which don't matter, and I stand for a second in the dark of my own front room with my hand on the back of my own chair, warm from me, still holding my shape, and I say the thing to the dark past the window, low, so I don't wake the house. I'm here. This is my place. I'm not leaving it empty again.